Hey everyone, what's up? Curse words already in the Twitch chat. Oh my goodness. Welcome to Normal America Show. Host robnoerr. I got a debate. It's running a little late, but it's supposed to start around 9 p.m. here against vegan gains on Tyre Nichols and supposedly systemic racism, though it wasn't really hashed out. Trust me, I'm very good at finding something to argue about. Now, you can't see them, but my office here has been improved significantly. I don't know if you could tell by the camera quality, but my background's different. I've got a desk that's slid out more and stuff like that. So my wife and her sister really helped me with that. So they decided, see, that's why. Where am I at? Audio on stream playing back. Don't need that. Don't need that. All right, that should have helped. Womp womp womp. Sorry about that. Anyways, they're in the side of the room right now, heckling me. I think they're cheering for the guy I'm debating. I don't think they'll stay here the whole time. Courtney, you got any predictions for tonight's debate?
No.
She said pain, like Clubber Lang in Rocky 3. Yeah, my sister Kelsey's here as well, and her big old dog. Come here, Jasper. This is Jasper. Come on up. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come up. You gotta come up. Hug. 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 Oh, it's freaking out. Come on. Hug. Come on. Not you. Not you. You're good too, old boy. Okay. Okay. There's people. But Jasper didn't even get on camera. Anyways, is it better now? Is the mic better now? Check, 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 check. Vegan Gains always threatens to beat up his opponents. That's why I got a little chest hair showing. We figure we'll just nip that in the bud before he even starts. This guy's going to threaten to fight me. It'll be like drink back in the day. It'll be good stuff. By the way, I'm on YouTube again till they kick me off, so I don't know. I might mention the word COVID or something and I'll get kicked off again. Who gives a shit anymore? Yeah, my sister had COVID. It was horrible just last week. So there we go. That's a strike. That's a strike. That's all you have to say on YouTube if you're me to get struck. So how's that sound? Oh, okay. It wasn't me. This guy, Bacon Love, screwed me up. So anyways, I'm back on YouTube. I have to give a caveat here. So first off, I'm going to be doing a bunch of whining streams asking for your money to try to get this new computer. It's going to run me about $1,500, but plus background stuff and stuff I'm getting, it'll be around $2,000 that I'm going to try to raise for it. But I think that I'll buy the stuff before I raise the money. Right, Courtney? We just got money lying around. So I think we'll do that. We'll do that. But until then, as you all know, my computer is shit. So, because I'm streaming to multiple platforms, if the worst happens and it craps out on me, you could always go to the Crucible on YouTube. And that debate, let me find that for you. It should already be up. Obviously, we're not starting yet, but the live stream should have been waiting. So I will share that with you. And I'll ask some of my more loyal fans. Oh, wait, that's me. That's not going to work. No! Oh, my goodness. Things are going awry here. Professional streamer. There we go. I clicked on my feed instead of the Crucible's feed. There he is. What a handsome guy. Not me, Vegan Gains. There's the guy. That's the guy who's going to threaten to beat me up, apparently, tonight.
Are you scared? He looks like John.
He looks like Wiggles a little bit, huh? Masculine eyebrows. Am I just debating my friend Wobbles? I don't think so. So, yeah, well, I know people prefer it here. Who wouldn't prefer it with me? Of course. But if it starts lagging too bad, you can always go to the Crucible. The other thing is I will record this, and then I'll probably upload it to YouTube and Rumble as its own thing. So that's the plan. But my preparation for tonight's debate is lacking, but not as lacking as it's been for other things. I actually have an opening statement written that looks like this. That should get me 8 minutes. Just a little outline. How am I always so based? Yeah, wife. Kelsey, Courtney, any comments on how based I am?
No.
So here's something. So I had to ask these two. I'm an old man, so they're more hip. They're into the more TikTok type shit. I did not know what the phrase out of pocket meant. So I had to turn to them. Like, as in, oh man, did you see that guy? He got out of pocket on his girlfriend. I was like, what does that mean? Like I thought it meant he paid money out of pocket, but no. Apparently it means getting crazy. Out of hand. Getting out of hand. I don't keep up with the vernacular, so.
Wow, then.
It's wild. I like that this guy might threaten to beat me up if I beat him in this debate. I like that. Beat me up or threaten to?
Not beat you up. Maybe. He might come beat you up. Don't say where we are.
Don't tell them I'm in Clarion, Pennsylvania. Oh, shit.
I will accept donations.
For me to get beat up. My wife and sister-in-law are very excited to watch me get beat up, apparently, as long as they make money on the deal. So I'm still checking to make sure. Andrew's supposed to send me the link. So sent you to Discord. Having trouble opening Twitter. Oh, okay. Give me a second. I gotta check Discord. Also, my wife and sister-in-law, Kelsey and Courtney, though I said that in the opposite way. They are Courtney and Kelsey. They're gonna be starting a stream, which I hope you all go watch. It'll have absolutely zero to do with politics or anything that I talk about. It might have to do with me, but just in what a shithead I am. Just yelling about me and Chevy. Not the vehicle either.
Maybe.
It could be the vehicle. All right, copy link.
We are foreign cars.
Now, I hope that this is going without lag, because I would love to do some more karaoke streams, but it doesn't work if the sound and video are slightly off. All right. I'm about to get out of pocket on this vegan games guy. Now, see, what sucks about being a good debater is everyone's like, oh, Rob's going to whoop this dude's ass. Then I'm going to come on here and get blown up, and people are going to be like, what happened? Whereas if no one has expectations for you, it's like,
I don't think, with how
I
dark
never
your
lose.
background is, I don't know if you should be wearing black on stream anymore.
I like it.
Everyone likes this outfit. It's what the Boogaloo Boys wear.
The
So
outfit, you called it an outfit. It's just a
don't
shirt.
get all drive-by truckers on me here.
Pants.
I have pants. I'm pantsed. Let's
You
see.
still can't see it.
Pantsed. Come on. I don't. Aftershock says, are they staying for the whole thing? I don't know. They don't have a headset on, so they can't hear. They'll just hear me ranting. In fact, wouldn't it be hilarious if I'm not even streaming? I'm just making all this up just for entertainment for these two. All right. Let's see. You're going to lose me video for a moment while I... my beautiful face with my dark shirt. But I'm still here. Don't worry. All right. Let's see. Let's get this started. Boop, boop, boop. Okay. There we are.
Can you hear me okay, Rob?
I do. I can hear you. Now, I'm streaming, so...
I had all these gamer words just waiting, too. And then, now I find out you're streaming, you know? First thing I was going to do is just scream them at the top of my lungs. But
Why not?
since you're streaming, I
Right.
guess...
So I have a new format here that I'm streaming. My wife and her sister are sitting here. They can't hear what's going on stream, but they're heckling me. That's the new format of my stream. Just my wife and sister heckling me the entire time, which is fair.
Well, I mean, let's face it, you totally deserve it. Right?
I know. It's true. I
You
do.
deserve it. You deserve it, so...
Hey, great stream last night, man. I went back and watched most of the debate. Not my cup of tea. PF Jung, not my cup of tea either, but it was good content. How you doing,
Hey,
sir?
Vegan, can you hear me okay?
Hey, what's up? Yeah, I can hear you good.
Okay, good. Rob, this is Vegan Gains Rob.
Nice to meet you, sir.
All right. So I think I don't really think that we need to kind of hone in on anything here. Rob, I'm going to let you open. You're going to open first, and I'll let you close last. But before
But
that,
if I open, just real quick, I'll open. I don't mind that. Are we taking it the angle of systemic racism? Because just the category of Tyre Nichols.
yeah, or would you prefer to open vegan?
I can open.
Okay.
I
well,
think that would make
It might make
debate
more
paths a little more clear.
Because vegan, not to
it's-
give anything away, or like, I don't know exactly what your take's going to be on this. I'm not going to defend the cops. So if it would be interesting to hear what you say so that I could respond, because it will be boring if we're both like, yeah, these cops are shitheads, you know. So
Yeah, sure. I think part of this you could you could chalk this up to maybe systemic racism. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but I can open.
okay, yeah,
That sounds good. I'm ready to rock then, guys. You ready to go?
let's do it. Good.
All right.
These fuckers.
Oh, Rob, one last thing. Can you turn your mic down just a little bit?
Yeah. Give me 1 second. It might need to turn down on StreamYard audio. Oh, shit. Just 1 second. Boomer stuff.
That's all good, man. It's all good.
Now, let your guest Vaush know if he ever wants to debate me. He just reach out to you. I'd be happy. He could pick the topic. It don't matter to me.
You sound
that better?
sound a lot better. Yeah, sound
Check.
a lot better
Okay.
there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. No problem. We'll get moving.
All right. Uh-oh. Froze. I got room to write. This thing is about to get wrecked. Yeah, that needs. I got it. I'm sorry.
Stupid ass camera. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crucible. I'm your host, Andrew Wilson. How's everybody doing this fine evening? Audio doing okay? Kind of reposition the mic a little bit because I hate having it right in my face. So, everybody hear me all right? Hopefully. All right, good. Good deal. So tonight's debate, we've got Vegan Gains going up against robnoerr on Tyre Nichols. This ought to be interesting to say the least. Kind of looking forward to this one. I was happy it actually came together how it did. Before we get started, make sure that you like, share, subscribe, all that neat stuff that Hypnotoad says you need to do. Now we'll be taking call-ins tonight and running our usual format. Of course, we also be taking super chats. Super chats take precedent. We may start actually running it where the super chats go first. That way we can get to all the super chats before we take on a caller. In fact, I think that that's the way we're going to run it tonight as well. Doesn't mean you can't send super chats in as people are calling in, but we've been running actually up against a wall where at the 3-hour mark, we haven't been able to get to all of the super chats because the call times have gone on for just a little bit too long. So we'll do the super chats first and then calls second. And then you can also use Dono Chat that's pinned at the top of the link. The reason that you should use Dono Chat and not YouTube is because I get to keep 100% of the Dono Chat because it's my payment processor. So I don't have to give anything to YouTube. Not that I actually mind a small percentage going to YouTube when people prefer to use that. So if that's your preference, that's okay. You can still use that. But I would prefer that they went through Dono Chat. Anyway, we'll be right back with both of our debaters. ladies and gentlemen, we are back to watch robnoerr and Vegan Gains go at it. Have you guys ever actually had a debate with each other, even one time?
No, never met till today, so I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this ought to be interesting to say the least. We discussed it behind the scenes, and Vegan Gains is actually going to open. Vegan, before you do, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, shout your channel out.
Yeah, so I'm Vegan Gains on YouTube. That's my YouTube handle. I'm also on Instagram now at vegangains.real. I upload mostly stuff about my motorcycles and pets, but also lifting content. And of course, I'm on OnlyFans if you want to see me naked.
Now, you always have to throw in that fucking OnlyFans, you know,
Yeah.
every single time with the only. All right, robnoerr, go ahead, shout your channel out, tell everybody where they can find you too.
Yeah, my name's robnoerr, populist conservative. You can find me on most platforms. I'm really pushing. I'm on YouTube, Normal America, on YouTube when they decide not to ban me. So I'm back, baby, after a week suspended. On Twitch at robnoerr, as you see it spelled there. But most importantly, on Rumble and comfy.stream at robnoerr Normal America. So you can check me out there. Also, donate money to me, and I won't create an OnlyFans because who the hell wants to see that? So.
Not me, Rob. I'll be the first one to say, not me. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and open the debate up. Vegan Gains, you have 7 minutes on the clock. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to have a good faith discussion about the details that led up to and caused the Tyre Nichols murder. Not all details about the murder have been revealed. What we do know for sure is that the initial traffic stop was bogus. They illegally stopped him, and as soon as they made contact with Tyre Nichols, their conduct was completely unprofessional and unjustifiable. There's been a lot of theories that have been put out for what happened. It's possible that these were just terrible cops, and Tyre Nichols was in the wrong place at the wrong time. There's an unconfirmed theory that Nichols was having an affair with an officer's wife, and the beating was retaliatory. When I first saw the footage, just the bizarre and aggressive nature of it made me think that these cops might have deliberately stopped Nichols specifically because they had some prior issue with him, or they're trying to get revenge for something he did, or they thought he was someone else. But what isn't really being talked about in the media is that it is entirely possible that the killing had an aspect of racial motivation behind it. And obviously this isn't really being talked about much because all the officers involved in the situation was black, as opposed to quite a few police killings that have had like racial notoriety to them, where it was all white officers attacking a black suspect, but in this instance, it was a black officers attacking a black suspect. But what we should recognize is that within group racism is quite common. The most overt and common example of this that I think people on the right wing are familiar with is white people promoting hatred of other white people. I'm sure we've all seen some crazy social justice warriors going on and on about how white people are evil, they're colonizers, they want to remove white people from any positions of power due to whiteness being inherently evil. The Rwandan genocide is probably a more comparable example to the Tyre Nichols killing, where black people racially differentiated themselves from other black people by slight differences in skin tone and body shape, where shorter and darker skinned Hutus racially profiled and killed taller and lighter skinned Tutsis, although all these people were ethnically black. Among other reasons, this was partially due to the lighter skinned Tutsis being favored over the darker skinned Hutus by the Belgian colonial rule at the time, despite Tutsis also being a minority. And I'm not saying this is an absolute fact, but I think we should recognize it as a possibility that a similar thing is happening with these black police officers. It's very easy for individuals to view themselves as separate from their own race. It's very easy for people to draw arbitrary racial lines within their own race. It's very easy for people to develop ideas of racial hierarchies, especially when they're forcibly placed into one. And the reality is, there has been a long history of bias against black people in the US. The police force has a long history of bias against black people. And these black officers were put in a position where they had an adversarial relationship with a black majority community. and were given near impunity when it came to how they engaged with this community. So I think we have to acknowledge that it is at least possible that these black officers could have developed implicit racial biases against their own race, or developed a sense of separation from other members of their own race, especially due to the hierarchical system they were placed in as police officers, and thus developed more explicit and conscious racial biases and hierarchies of their own, which could have contributed to the killing of Tyre Nichols. And lastly, I think people should consider and think in their own heads, if this were an alternate universe and Tyre Nichols was white, would the officers, under all the same circumstances, have treated Tyre Nichols the same if he was white? In my opinion, I don't think so. So that's my opening statement.
All right, thank you for that opening statement. robnoerr, you also have 7 minutes on the clock. Go ahead when you're ready.
All right, thanks for having me. First, there's some things to say at the outset. I don't know how spicy of a take my opponent's opening statement was, but don't worry, I'll find a way to disagree. So these cases, we have so many law enforcement officers and so many people in this country, and almost everyone has one of these, a recording device, a simple cell phone or something like that. You could create the narrative you wanted to about any particular color of law enforcement officer harassing or abusing any particular color or religion or sexual orientation of anyone you wanted. When you have millions of law enforcement officers and hundreds of millions of people in this country, it's inevitable that you'll be able to point. You could probably find a black officer beating an Asian person. You could probably find an Asian person beating a lesbian of color, right? Like, so I find it a little tiresome, these narratives, because when you look at the end result of like the amount of actual people that are killed, unarmed people that are killed by police, although each one is a tragedy, anyone dying, not all of them are unjustified, but all of them are a tragedy, and you grieve for the family members of the person who passed away. It's easy to use these narratives to divide people and to spin a story by selectively focusing on the issues that you want in the particular racial groups. And this is something that the people that kind of run our institutions and control our cultural narratives, those in our Washington class, the media class, etc., they have a vested interest in keeping us divided and hyper-focusing on these sorts of situations. So I really don't have much interest in this particular case other than to say, looks like the police behaved egregiously, and I feel horrible for the man who died and his family. I really do. Other than that, everything's going to be pure supposition, but that's okay. I'm still game. Vegan Gain says we should accept that it's a possibility, not proven, but a possibility that this was racism. Sure, I guess we could also accept it's a possibility that they're actually skinwalkers and that they're aliens wearing black people suits while being police officers. I guess it's a possibility. Now, obviously, I'm being a little facetious, but yeah, you could say anything's a possibility. I don't know what kind of hot take it is. The point is we have no clue. And in order to try to make the claim that these 5 black officers did what they did to Tyre Nichols because he was black, I think the precursor to that would be some sort of proof that these same officers engaged vastly different when they had as similar situations as possible with white suspects. And I haven't heard any of that alleged. So to just say it couldn't be that these were bad cops, it couldn't be that they were aggressive people. No, we have to focus on whether or not race could have had something to do with it. It just seems like this is pushing a prefabricated narrative that we saw, when it was Trayvon Martin, when it was a white guy killing him, only it wasn't a white guy, it was a Hispanic guy. Or when we saw with Hands Up, Don't Shoot, only that was a lie as well. It's the same bullshit narrative. And I find it interesting in his opening statement, he said, not many people are talking about this being a race issue. Are you shitting me? Do you watch the mainstream media? That's all you hear from people that have a particular bent. It's indicative of something Black Lives Matter did the entire time during the George Floyd riots. It's indicative of something Eric Holder did. Eric Holder famously said when he was Attorney General, this country's too cowardly to have a conversation about race. That's all we do. It's constantly a conversation about race. Constantly. And yet it's never enough. The people of Black Lives Matter said, no one's looking at our issue. No one's talking about the issue. I couldn't turn on Call of Duty without the racial message being thrown in my face. So everyone's talking about it, but apparently we have to talk about it more. But as long as we're admitting that we don't know definitively what this was, let me say that it could be systemic racism or it could be racism. There's no proof. I would say that it's more likely that it's not a racial issue. It's a violent issue. Memphis is one of the top 5 most violent violent cities in this country. Police there are more likely to justifiably or unjustifiably use force because it's such a violent area. But it also could be racism in other factors, such as racism from the Democratic Party and left-wingers that said all cops are bastards and we need to defund the police, which increased that violence, which means it's more likely that police will have these interactions. The victimhood culture that has encouraged people in the African-American community to say that they're entitled, they never do anything wrong, and have an adversarial relationship with the police that becomes a self-fulfilling policy. Democrat identity politics in cities and the country, which has devastated the economy in these inner cities, which causes increase in crime and increases in violent interactions with police. Democrat policies that incentivize single parenthood, which took a male role model out of the family of so many people, which causes so many negative interactions dealing with the police. There's also the truth that when we're talking about racism, what we fail to realize is that these institutions that supposedly have this racism that's insidious, I'm not denying that there's a history of racism against black people in this country that is unbelievable. It's disgusting. It's a scar on this country that will never fully be healed. But what we do is acknowledge and move forward, but we don't punish people for that. Now, I'm not saying that the ramifications of that still can't be harming people today, but what we see is every institution of power is now playing the racism or the cultural Marxists, saying there are people that are aggressive, people that are abusers, and people that are victims. And now the people that those institutions are doing it directly to are white people, are men, are straight people, and are Christians, all of these other groups that they deem oppressors. So, for example, we could see the CDC, when it recommended giving out what they called were life-saving vaccines, they said that they were going to give it to a group that they admitted would cause more deaths. But that's because there were more black people in the group that they preferred giving it to. We also hear about redlining a lot and about how that led to racism of economic devastation in the black community. Now we have America's biggest mortgage lender, Wells Fargo, and proudly announcing we'll continue to give mortgages to people of color, but not white people. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've gone full circle and we're now at whitelining. So all we ever do is talk about racism against people in the black community. I think that that in itself does contribute to a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's something we need to talk about. But most of these institutions are blatantly being racist to or bigoted to the groups that they consider oppressives: conservatives, men, white people, straight people. So I look forward to talking more about this specific case, but that's my opening statement.
All right, appreciate that opening statement too. So I expect that this may become a pretty fiery debate. I'm going to try to stay out of it as much as possible unless I need to redirect it back to the actual point, which is Tyre Nichols. But I understand that this may lead into broader concepts and a broader debate, which I'm okay with. Gentlemen, before we get into that, let me just say again to everybody who's just now joining us, make sure that you like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff that you're supposed to do that bumps us up in the algorithm. And also consider becoming a channel member. That's one of the things you can do that helps us more than anything else. And you can also give the gift of a channel membership to one of the less fortunate poors in the audience who can't afford one with your largest. So, and by the way, after they get it, you can call them all poors and shame them a little bit just because it's fun to do. And I don't mind at all. Gentlemen, the floor is open. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think we should probably start by talking about some of the evidence that we do know exists for sure for why this kind of points in the direction to me for why this might have been racially motivated. So first of all, these black police officers were members of a unit called the Scorpion Unit. Very bizarre name for police officers that are supposed to be supporting a community. That name alone kind of shows you there was this kind of adversarial relationship with the community to begin with. Like, they might as well have called it the, I don't know, Cobra Death Squad Unit. It's just a very strange name.
Can I interject real quick on that point specifically?
I know it was an acronym for, like, community safety something or other.
But no, it's not even that. Like, what if I told you this? You don't know where I live, right? You don't know what the makeup of my community is, right?
No.
Would you believe that me and my neighbor developed the Panther Society because we hate all of our neighbors? Are we racist against them?
Well, no, but, like, I don't know, people making a club called the Panther Society is a little bit different than police officers who have a duty to serve and protect a community being called a Scorpion Unit.
Maybe, but that has nothing to do
strange.
with race. You could say, well, that's inappropriate of them to have an aggressive name when it comes to policing a community. But you have no evidence that that's racially motivated.
Well, sure, but I'm I'm getting to the
Okay.
point. So they were called the Scorpion Unit. What they would typically do is do pretextual stops. So what that means is this was a unit that was targeting violent crimes specifically. When police officers have too much time on their hands, they're not actually dealing with crimes. What they'll do is they'll conduct bogus traffic stops as a pretext for conducting further investigation so that they can see if they can find guns or weed and then press like harsher charges. It wouldn't surprise me if they would target black people specifically more than white people. I know it was a majority black neighborhood that they were in, but it wouldn't surprise me. I don't know for sure, but what we do know is that the traffic stop was bogus. We know that for sure. It was a horseshit traffic stop. The reason we know this is because when Tyre Nichols was taken out of the car, he was saying, he was very calm and he was compliant. He was saying, okay, I'm listening. I don't understand what I did. He was very confused. When he ended up running away and other police officers were on the scene and they were talking to the initial arresting officers, they asked, what did you stop him for? Like, why are we trying to chase him? They didn't give a reason. The reason they mentioned in the police report that they filed later was that he was guilty of reckless driving. They didn't mention that it was for reckless driving. They just said he ran away. If they had stopped him for any particular reason, like running a red light or driving too fast or something like that, or suspicion of driving while under the influence, they probably, in all likelihood, would have mentioned that to the other officers.
Okay. Can I interject? Like, I
Sure.
think that it's good that, given that your position in this is that racism could have had something to do with it, for you to outline your best case of the evidence you see that race may have been a contributing factor to this. And when the best you have is, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't have proof, but I wouldn't be surprised if race was an issue. I mean, that's nothing. That's the end of the
Well,
debate. That's you literally, like, you need some sort of evidence to make the. For example,
Well,
it would
sure,
be
I'm still
absurd.
not done,
Just
though.
real quick. Well, okay, but so far, what you've outlined, the Scorpion thing, it had nothing to do with race. What you've outlined so far, none of it has anything to do with race. It would be similar if I did this. If I said, I assume, based on the disagreement that Vegan Gates and I are having here, that he's racist, and people would be like, well, why would you assume that? Well, he's disagreeing with me. Right? And he seems like someone who's going to passionately disagree with me while saying that his side in this is right. They'd be like, right, that's what you're expected to do in a debate. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if race has something to do with it. Like, people would say, you're fucking nuts. You need some sort of proof. So I've yet to see even one iota of anything you suggest. It sounds like it is an equally, if not more plausible explanation to say this. They were in a community that was primarily black. They probably deal with a lot of violence in that community, seeing as how Memphis is the 5th most violent city in this country. And that probably means they get a chip on their shoulder, and they probably do shit that they shouldn't be doing. But I don't see any evidence that that's racially based.
Well, I think probably the strongest evidence that we can tell for sure, that's empirically verifiable, is they actually used black signifiers when they were engaging with Tyre. When they pulled him out of the car, they were referring to him as nigga. They said nigga multiple times. When Tyre escaped, and the second time they engaged with him, and you can see the body camera footage, they were calling him brother over and over again. This isn't something I would suspect even black cops to call a white person. I've been in black communities before, and I've been to schools with a lot of black kids, a lot of white kids. I've never in my life seen black people refer in casual conversation or during fights refer to a white guy as nigga or a white guy
Can we just like
as
abbreviate?
brother.
Can we abbreviate
Sure,
that
sure.
for TOS
well,
purposes?
I mean, you got a kind of a free pass because I'm black, but
see,
sure.
okay,
And it's,
if-
it's not a hard R. It's not a hard
okay,
R.
I know, but let's
Sure.
Yeah.
So if I could
Call them-
jump in here. If I could jump in. So this is your best evidence that black cops talked to a black man and used the N-word and called him brother. And you said you've never heard in a casual conversation black people say that. Now, I know Andrew's not part of the debate. He could choose to confirm or deny this if he wants, but I know a lot of the people that watch Andrew possibly watched him when he was on a show that I hosted called Drunken Debates. And one of the people that were on the show the one week was a man by the name of Joe Lewis, who happens to be black. And Joe Lewis, every time I interact with him, ends up saying, "Come on, N-word, what you saying?" or something like that. It happens quite frequently. I've seen this happen dozens of times in panels and interaction. And that's just little old me interacting with people on here. I refuse to believe that a black person calling a white person the N-word or calling another black person the N-word or brother is somehow significant that it proves that they have a racial bias. If that was the case, I pretty much think every public black entertainer now has to be accused of racism because I've heard them call other black people the N-word umpteen times.
Well, the point I'm making is that they specifically chose to use racial signifiers, normally during a stop. I've watched Cops quite a lot. I've seen A&W's or A&E's series where they it's a similar thing to Cops. I've seen black officers deal with like black and white suspects. They typically don't use racial signifiers. So clearly these black officers cared about Tyre's race enough to use black signifiers to identify him and recognize him as a black man, which is a little suspicious. Not only is it a bit unprofessional to use language like N-word, get on the ground, I'm gonna tase you, N-word, or I'm like, brother, you gone fucked up now, brother, you fucked up, we're gonna get you. Not only is that, inappropriate, I think, in a workplace context, but again, they deliberately chose to use racial signifiers. That's not normal for police to use racial signifiers when dealing with a suspect.
If I may, it's also not normal to throw haymakers when they're handcuffed. Like, no one's arguing these police behaved in a professional manner. I'm far more concerned about their actually killing of this man and inappropriate beating of him than they used harsh language while they were doing it. Let me give an ulterior explanation. These cops probably weren't the most professional. In fact, I would argue, thanks to movements like BLM and defund the police and all cops are bastard, what we've done is we've made it so no one in their right mind ever wants to go into policing. And so we see numbers of police dwindling in these violent cities, which is leading to the very communities that these groups said to want to protect, inner city communities. Now we see violent crime is rising in those areas, which has predictably led to a glut in the amount of officers. And so they're now lowering the standards. And this happened in Memphis. They lowered the standards such as mental evaluations, physical standards, etc., in order to be a police officer. So many of these cops that were hired could have been hired under these lower standards. Now, I believe that was alleged for some of them. I don't know if it was alleged for all of them. But regardless of that, let me just finish this point real quick. It's clear that they behaved in an unprofessional manner. It could be because there was some sort of chase, right? They were pissed off because this person didn't comply initially, and being unprofessional, they let their adrenaline get the best of them and were like, what the hell are you doing? That wouldn't be professional to say that either, to use the H word in that context. And they probably are people that talk in this vernacular because of their culture quite frequently, and so that came out. I do not believe in a moment of high adrenaline, them using the N-word is a signifier that, this proves that the reason they're taking this actions is because this black. And the last thing that you mentioned there that I'll just comment on is you said, well, they noticed he was black, that's why they were using the N-word. Maybe not, they might have said that of his one person, but let's concede that argument. Let's say, sure, right, they noticed a black man was black. I'm failing to see the problem. If I claim that I don't notice race, people say, well, that's racist in itself. But the idea that this is the smoking gun, that some cops said the word brother and some other racial slurs and noticed the guy was black, that's nothing. There's just nothing there.
Yeah, so first of all, with your claim about police officers leaving, which is leading to more violent crime, actually during the period for which Memphis saw a exodus of their police officers, violent crime actually went down. So as their police force was understaffed, violent crime was at an all-time low over that 10-year period. It wasn't until they started hiring more officers to fill that position that violent crime increased. So I don't really see a link between amount of
Well,
officers
I would be
available in violent
I would be
crime.
interested in seeing the police officers, not just the number of officers, but the number of officers per capita, like per population. I'd be interested to see that. And I'm not denying I don't concede the point because I don't see the proof. But you said 10 years. When was this low point of police officers then in Memphis? Do you have a roundabout date, like 2020,
Yeah,
2013?
I think it was between 2011 and up to 2020.
Okay,
around
so
there,
your claim
over that 10-year period.
So over that 10-year period, they had less police officers, but there was more.
They started hiring. As they started hiring, crime went up. When they're at the absolute lowest point of police officers hired on staff, crime was at an all-time low. Actually,
So
it was at the lowest point over that 10-year period.
I mean, again, I would have to see proof of that. I'm not sure that I believe it, but I could.
Well,
but
I don't want this to get too academic.
No, I don't.
Anyway,
But I'll just say this: the period of time I'm talking about is not just the amount of police officers, but also the demoralization of police officers. And there's not a lot of new blood getting in because a lot of people that would otherwise be qualified understand that it is fool's errand. Because if you have one bad interaction, the scope will be placed on you, and your life will be ruined. And so what happens is they have to lower the standards for the people that they hire. So they may very well have more police officers now that they did in 2013. That's probably true. But the question is the standards of the officer. And I'm willing to hear you try to defend the standard hiring practice of the officers because it's clear that these 5 officers didn't meet that standard.
Yeah, so they changed the hiring standards. The only thing they changed was the educational requirement. I think initially they required a bachelor's degree, but they lowered it to having a certain amount of hours in post-secondary education. So you didn't actually have to complete a degree. You just had to have a certain amount of hours in some sort of post-secondary education after high school. I don't see that being a contributing factor to how they treated Tyre Nichols, and only 2 of the 5 officers were actually hired under those new standards. So all the other officers had a minimum of a bachelor's degree. 2 of them may not have had bachelor's degrees, but they would have had to have completed a minimum amount of post-secondary education. I don't see how. I don't see the difference between.
God, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Well, I just don't see the difference between saying having only a high school degree and then having a few hundred hours of some sort of post-secondary education versus having a bachelor's degree would turn the situation from legitimate stop, nobody got beaten or wrongfully arrested or dead versus what happened here in the Tyre Nichols case. I don't see the educational difference.
Well, I don't think it's not just the educational difference, right? The lowering of standards is just indicative of what I'm saying, that the quality of people they're getting that want to be police officers are less and less. Because if you were a good person that would have the right temperament to be a police officer, you probably have other options and other careers you could go to, and you'd be a fool to get into the career of policing. A lot of good police officers are leaving because they see how it's just the public perception against police officers because of left-wingers have become so bad. But nonetheless, this is sort of a red herring. I don't want us to get off the central point. You're outlining your case for why you think racism was quite literally a possibility in this situation. And the best evidence you could come up with is they said the word brother and the N-word. And I just think that like you're trying to sell to all of us that 5 black people who happen to be police officers use the N-word, and because those black people use that word, it proves that there's racial motivations, when all of us here routinely hear black people use the N-word in sort of an affirmative way, a positive way to other black people all the time. I just don't understand how you could make that leap, and you're literally saying this is your best evidence.
So the purpose of this discussion wasn't to definitively prove that this was racially biased. I can't look into the officer's mind. Not enough information in the case is really being released to definitively show what exactly happened and what the motivations were involved. My case here is to acknowledge that it certainly is a realistic possibility. And I think given enough of a history with race relations around the world, what we know about within group racism, and what we know about the police force and the interaction that happened with Tyre Nichols, it is certainly possible. And I think you're kind of minimizing the N-word thing where these police were using black signifiers. Again, if you had to arrest somebody and it was a tense, hostile situation, like if you see the video of the Tyre Nichols arrest, it was very hostile from the very beginning. It would just be strange to me if I was in a situation like that to add racial descriptors rather than just say, get on the ground, put your hands behind the back, put your hands behind. Why did they add racial descriptors? What it seems to me, what is likely, is that they were using those racial descriptors as a means to differentiate themselves from Tyre Nichols. He was a black man who they wanted to be a thug. And again, they had this relationship with the community. They were a unit that was supposed to deal with violent crime in particular in a mostly black neighborhood. It is likely that they use these racial signifiers as a means of differentiating themselves from that community and from Tyre Nichols, where he's a black thug, he's an N-word, and they're above that. And again, they're in a higher hierarchical structure than Tyre. They're police.
I don't see any proof of that. That is just all assumption. What if it would turn out over the course of this trial, right, that the prosecutors make this argument and the defense is like, here's the pickup police basketball games at the local YMCA that we always film because it's funny. We like to show clips of them at the police ball every year. And here's these guys playing. Pass me the ball, N-word. Whoops. They just called each other the N-word. Therefore, they're not differentiating. Would that be enough for you? If we found any evidence whatsoever that any of these 5 police officers had called each other the N-word in the past, you would say, oh, well, that's evidence to me that they're not differentiating themselves because they're using the same language to describe themselves.
So you should view the N-word kind of like how Australians use the word cunt. It can be an endearing, and it often is used as an endearing term at this point, where, like, sick cunt. It's an endearing term to me and somebody's awesome. Or they'll say to your friend, hey, cunt, can you pass me the beer? Like, it's a friendly term. When you hear people in the black community saying, like, N-word, pass me the ball, or you're my N-word, that's an endearing use of that word. In the context that they were using it with Tyre Nichols, it was not an endearing use of the word. It was an insulting use of the word.
But you just proved my point.
Look, you can hear in rap lyrics. You can hear in rap lyrics where, like, rappers will say, I'd blast that N-word. Clearly, it's not an endearing use of that word.
Right. So, okay. So is that right? Just real quick. When the rapper says, "I'll blast that N-word" to another black guy, is that racism?
Sorry?
When a rapper says, "I will blast that N-word" in a rap song, is that racism?
Probably not. It could be though.
Right, but you could say that. Name me one topic that we could talk about that you couldn't say probably not, but it could be. Well, I guess if it probably would. But you could make that claim about anything. Like, you could say, anytime someone criticizes someone who's Jewish, that could be anti-Semitism. Anytime someone criticizes someone who's Hispanic, that could be bigotry against Latinos. Like, I guess it could be, but we need more proof than they use the N-word or use the word brother. And when you're admitting, well, the thing about the N-word is there's so many, it's colloquially used. It could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. Like, all this proves to me is that they were unprofessional, that they were amped to shit, right? And we could see the results of that. I'm not defending their behavior. But none of this, when this is your strongest evidence towards racism, and I understand you're saying, well, I'm not here to definitively prove it, but this is the problem. When you delve into this foray, and we could see, I hope we get to it, what the end results of trying to make everything about race is and how it actually exacerbates things and makes the very problems worse that you claim to want to solve. Like, I think it's incumbent on you having more evidence to delve into this, just like, well, my gut feeling is it could have been that. That's just no evidence. What's the debate to be had here?
Well, again, my point that I'm trying to make is that there's a relatively high probability, if I had to put a number on it, I'd say like maybe 25%. There's a fairly good chance. And again, this isn't about any one particular piece of evidence. This is about a greater picture. It involves institutional racism. It can involve implicit bias. It can involve explicit developed biases due to hierarchical systems that are created. Again, they're part of the Scorpion unit. They're patrolling a black community. They automatically have an adversarial relationship with the community. They are making pretextual stops. They stopped a black man in particular. They used racial signifiers. All of this, again, leads me to believe that there's a very high likelihood, and black on black racism, and I mean racism within a lot of different groups, is a bigger problem than I think people realize. And I wish the discussion around the Tyre Nichols killing, it shouldn't just amount to, well, since all the officers were black, I guess they were just shitty cops. I think there's more meaningful conversations that we can have, and even if it isn't the case in this killing, that it wasn't racially motivated, I think it is a meaningful conversation to have, and to at least acknowledge the possibility that it could be racially motivated. I mean, there's crazy shit that you can see online. I mean, there's that black woman on Dr. Phil who was literally saying black people are inferior, and she refused to acknowledge that she was part of the black race. You see smaller microcosms of that in daily life. The YouTuber Low Tier God, who recently got banned from YouTube, black guy, extremely racist to black people. You will, like, if you spend enough time around black people, you'll start to see a lot of black people who really don't like other black men or other black women. You often see this, and you will see them using terms like, oh, I'm not like this crispy, black, dark, ugly skin. I have this nice peanut buttery complexion. They'll use terms like that to try to racially differentiate themselves from other black people.
Sure,
They'll
this
also
happens
talk
all the
about
time. You primarily see
Right,
it with
so-
left-leaning black people. For example, I remember the whole Donovan McNabb's not black enough, right? There is a cultural phenomenon that occurs a lot in the black community where people say, this is blackness, and if you do things like get a proper education and things like that, you're not really a black person. Or as Joe Biden put it, you're not really a black person if you don't vote for him. I'm getting a lot of like weird tangential, thoughts on the
Well,
transgender
it's not-
issue. I gave you a big chunk there.
Sure.
I'm getting some tangential thoughts to the trans issue, where it's like what we've learned from the trans community is the best women are men. Now I'm learning from the black community the best racist against blacks are other blacks. Like, yeah, no shit. There are black people that could be racist against black. I don't disagree with that. The problem is when you always have to have, anytime a black person is a victim, or that there's any interaction that portrays a particular black person in a negative light with some sort of enforcement authority, we always have to say, was racism? Sometimes racism doesn't exist. Maybe it's worth talking about the problems that occur when you always have to say, well, racism's a possibility anytime a black person's involved. I think it's belittling. It leads to a bigotry of low expectations for black people. I think that we should have agency to understand that there are shitty people that will enact shitty to a person even if you happen to be black, and it might not be because you're black. So again, I don't see evidence. I don't mind saying, sure, race could be a factor. There are black racist people out there that are racist. All that's true, but we see no evidence in this particular situation that was the cause. It seems more likely that if we're really concerned about having a productive conversation, we should talk about the things that are really impacting inner city black communities, such as the establishment and Democrat control that's keeping them basically on a Democratic plantation, and that's causing violent crime to spike in these neighborhoods, predominantly from other black people. These cops were in a very dangerous community. They acted shittily. I'm not defending the police officers here, but you're more likely to get cops engaged in violence legitimately or illegitimately in neighborhoods where there is increased amount of violence. And so the question we should be asking ourselves is, why is that sort of violence occurring? Not just shouting racism as the end-all be-all answer, which we've been doing, the Democrat Party's been doing for my entire life, and yet things aren't getting better. I wonder why.
Okay, well, the reality is police officers are more likely to die from COVID than from any job-related deaths, including interactions with civilians. It's pretty rare that they ever die due to civilian interaction. So to say their job is particularly dangerous and to try to hand-wave away that there could have been biases within the police force and they just have a chip on their shoulder because their job is so dangerous, I think that also leads into a racial discussion. How much of their job and their training, when they're told things are so dangerous, where you have to, keep your wits about you, where you have to have your gun drawn during a traffic stop, how much of that has a racial impact where a lot of the people who've created these sorts of training systems for police are white people who may have a racial bias against black people and have this perception that black people are more dangerous. Again,
Are
you
they?
Sorry?
Are they?
It depends on the community, but again,
That's a great answer. I agree 100%.
Sure.
That's a great answer. So then the question is, if you're in the 5th most dangerous community in the country, do you think, not even just a danger to you, don't misunderstand me, there is more likely to be danger to the police officers I live in rural America. The police here, if they would pull a black person over, they're not going to be amped up because everyone here, violence is very rare in a place like this, even though poverty is very prolific here. But in inner cities where you have high levels of poverty with high population, it tends that there's going to be more violence. And so in these communities, the cops are going to be more on edge, not just because of potential violence directed at them, but also because potential violence directed at other members of the community, more likelihood for people to flee, more likelihood to be dealing with perpetrators that engage in violent crimes like assault, rape, battery, murder, and things like that. So those cops are going to be more on edge and more likely to legitimately use force and also to illegitimately use force.
You're making a good point there, which I think shows greater likelihood of racial bias in the Tyre Nichols killing. Tyre Nichols had, I think, Crohn's disease. He was only like 140 or 150 pounds at over 6 foot, so he was rail thin, incredibly skinny and weak. He posed no actual physical threat. They found no weapons on him. In the later police report, they claimed that he tried to reach for their gun. You can look at the body cam footage and look at the street view footage from the traffic cam. He never did that, so again, that was a bogus claim that's already being debunked. On the initial stop after they grabbed him out of the car, if they felt that he was such a danger, how would he have been able to get free? Again, 5 officers, 140-pound, very weak, skinny guy with Crohn's disease. If he was considered such a danger, they would have held his legs down. There would have been an officer over top of him. There'd be another officer trying to grab his hands. They wouldn't allow him to have an opportunity to get up, grab around, and move his arms if they considered him as such a threat. And again, if they thought he was such a threat, they wouldn't have chased him down the way they did. They would have gotten more backup. And they just kept beating him when he was handcuffed. Like, at no point in time did they see this guy as a threat. So that's not really a good... Well, just a second. Like, that's just not a very good argument, and it just points more in the direction that this was racially motivated and not a product of these police having poor training and being in a very bad, dangerous neighborhood where they might end up getting a chip on their shoulder.
So again, right, first off, your size relative is sort of irrelevant as to whether or not you could engage in acts of violence. We live in a world where everyone could have a firearm that could make an 80-pound grandma.
Well, he didn't have a firearm.
Right, but it's not in just what this particular incident was. It was what these officers possibly deal with on a daily basis. In general, it makes sense that officers that are in more violent communities are probably more likely to use violence themselves, justified or unjustified. Now, again, you're talking about the failings of these officers, which I'm agreeing. I'm agreeing that these officers were terrible. Now, Tyre Nichols did bad stuff, too. He fled from the police, and we need to have a conversation of how this constant talk of systemic racism policing is leading to people in the African-American community more likely to not comply with police, which then amps them and the police up, which causes more of these incidents. Remember, after George Floyd, the infamous man who fled a Wendy's and then stole the taser off the cop and shot the cop and then ended up getting shot and killed himself. That's sort of what these conversations lead to. It's this perpetual victim mindset. But again, nothing that you just said there justifies race. Let's concede the whole argument. Let's say, fine, they knew this guy wasn't a threat and they were just a-holes that were looking to take aggression out. Prove that race had an issue to do with it. The other thing I'll say real quick there that you mentioned, you said a lot of these training programs are created by white people. Probably true. That could be true. But there's also more and more policing and more people, not just in areas of governance, but developing these programs and having the laws in local government that are black. And I don't know specifically Memphis, but my guess would be it would be similar to places like Minneapolis that we saw with George Floyd, where the council president's black, more than 50% of the police officers are black, the people that are in charge with implementing the policies, such as attorney generals and stuff like that, are black. So we're in this sort of, what it looks like to me, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is everything's racist all the time. Even if we had all black people writing the policies, we'd say, well, black people could be racist too. And so just because a black person created the policy doesn't mean that it's not so when you say it could always be racism, that's constantly going to be the conversation that a certain racial grifting class has. We could give infinite reparations. You could set the number right now. What is the amount of reparations? What is the amount of control of the levers of governments that black Americans can need? You could say $1 billion to every black American and 99% of all public institutions ran by black people. And the moment that there's a bad interaction from police and a black person, they'll say, well, it's still systemic racism. Even 40 years from now, they would still be saying it. So this is when you say it could be, right. It's anytime there is an interaction with any authority figure in a black person, it could be racism, even if it's black. Well, black people could be, even if it was written, the code was written by a black person. Well, they could be racist too. But you don't have any proof. And what's this conversation get us, right? Why aren't we instead having a conversation about the people that are actually running these things? They don't give a shit about the black community. They don't care. They're using the language that you're using as lip service because then black people support them. They say, yes, the Democrats care. They care about the black community. And yet they constantly run these towns and things get worse and worse and worse and nothing ever changes because they just use you as a token. That's what they're using the black community as. And meanwhile, the very policies that they're pushing, such as erosion of the family unit, attacks on masculinity, attacks on Christianity, defunding police and things like that, that's actually exacerbating the problems. Why don't we have a conversation about funding the police? We should have more training for the police. We should have more surveillance devices so we can monitor the police. Instead of defunding police, why aren't we funding them? Well, because then that would get us out of a conversation of racism. And no one wants to do that, apparently.
Okay, a few things to say there. First of all, this is like kind of basic math. Again, I don't have the most unreasonable position where I think this had to have been racism. Like I said at the beginning of the debate, I just want people to acknowledge that it's a likely possibility. So when we just look at like basic math, if the three basic possibilities are, okay, maybe these cops were on edge, had a chip on their shoulder, had some bad training, and they were genuinely like worried about Tyre Nichols for some stupid reason, and then they acted completely badly. Other option, they're just fucking assholes. They're looking to fuck somebody up. Other option is they're particularly biased and racist against other black men. If we eliminate that possibility of they were legitimately afraid and worried and some of their training kicked in, well, then we have those two other options. The percent chance of that racial bias goes up. I'm just trying to get people to recognize that. Again, in my opinion, I think there's roughly a 25%,
right.
like roughly 25% chance, in my view.
That's still most likely not the case. So if that's the case,
fine.
right? Right. But let's say that our discussion here, obviously it's for content, obviously because we're having a disagreement, a debate, that's what goes on. But if we really wanted as a nation to have a conversation to lessen violence against the inner city black community, or violent interactions between police and people in the inner city black community. And we're saying, well, there's one possibility that's 75%, and there's another possibility that's 25%. Why does it seem that 90% of the conversation surrounded about what you say is 25% chance?
Well, I think it's a more meaningful discussion given the circumstances around this particular killing. I just want people to acknowledge that there are potentials for black officers to be racist against members of the black community, and I think that's its own unique problem that nobody's really talking about. A lot of other people are talking about police funding, training, what jobs the police should be, but I think this is an important issue that people are glossing over, so that's why I'm talking about it. Secondly,
I disagree. I've heard this all over the place, but...
Well, if we're talking about mainstream media like CNN, stuff like in alternative media like Young Turks, they're mentioning it, but I don't think they're really talking about it as enough and as strongly as they could. I've seen them mention it. But to get to some of the other points you made, you talked about like defunding the police causing problems. Well, if you defund the police, that could potentially reduce the amount of work they do and not necessarily interfere with like training resources. So one argument for this is police should not be performing traffic stops, and there should be a different type of traffic enforcement, kind of like how we have parking enforcement. And the argument for that is, and it's pretty well based, there's some research emerging right now where cities who have trained their officers not to perform pretextual stops, where you have certain crime units that specifically try to target gangs or drug traffickings. What they'll do is these pretextual stops where they'll, stop you for some bogus traffic violation, like you didn't put your signal on when you were turning right, even though it was like a turning lane, bullshit like that. And then they'll use that to try to, get an excuse to search your car, find guns, drugs like that. Cities that have actually gotten rid of pretextual stops have seen a pretty dramatic decrease in violent crime, specifically. So the people who are legitimately...
Give me an example of one of those cities.
I can't remember the city specifically, sorry, but you can look it up with cities that have gotten rid of pretextual stops.
Can I name a city and you tell me if they do pretextual or not? Would that, like New York,
I can just
Chicago,
try and see.
New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Atlanta, like any of those major cities, Memphis.
Let me see if I can. Let me see. I think, San Francisco. It was San Francisco who recently got rid of pretextual stops, and they've actually seen a decrease in violent crime. I think there was some other city recently that also did that. More police agencies are recognizing that pretextual stops, again, not only creates a problem within the community, where if you're getting stopped by the police for bullshit fucking reasons, like, people aren't going to respect the police. It's literally just harassing people. Not only have reports against the police reduced dramatically after they got rid of pretextual stops, but violent crime has just gone down as a result as well. So limiting some of the actions that the police can do where you can get a situation like the Tyre Nichols case, if these police weren't doing that job where they're doing a pretextual bullshit fucking stop, well, then you have another traffic enforcer that would have stopped Tyre Nichols, nothing would happen. Like, generally speaking, if people know they're getting pulled over by somebody and they can't get arrested and all they're going to get is like maybe a $50 fine, things are probably just going to go a bit more smoothly. So people who are talking about defunding the police in an actual serious manner, what they're talking about is really rolling back some of the responsibilities of the police.
All right, so there's so much. So there's so much that you said there, right? Like, I'm going to need some. I'm not one to normally do this, but I'm going to need some sources because some source on this, and let me tell you why. First off, San Francisco famously has basically stopped policing any sort of property crime, and it's a shithole. People are fleeing because there are people defecating on the streets, shooting up on the streets in front of children, just walking into department stores, stealing stuff. I know when it comes to crimes like burglaries, car theft, and things like that, those are through the roof. I'm going to look at the violent crime statistics and see if it's true that violent crime in San Francisco has been going down. I don't think that's the case. But if it's true, it might just be that...
Violent crime has been going down practically everywhere.
That's not
it's
true.
Only spiked a little bit due to COVID, but violent crime has been going down practically everywhere. That's not true, and it's not due to COVID.
For example, in Canada, we could see while COVID hit, violent crime has actually gone down. But in the United States, it went up. People just say it's due to COVID. It's not. People are locked down more. It's due to the fact that...
Okay, don't even use that word either. Just lockdowns, please.
Yeah. Nonetheless, right, skipping that point of it, you're making this affirmative claim. I'm telling you, like, I'll just leave it to the audience. Do you think policing in San Francisco is the direction the country should go? And then there's all sorts of other questions, like with exactly what you're talking about, right? So first off, you're just wrong that this is what people were talking about. They were talking about, for example, in Minneapolis, I believe it was maybe Portland, Oregon. The mayor got booed because he wouldn't commit to a total defunding of the entire police force. This is what many activists that talk about systemic racism talk about. And they'll say things like this. Oh, domestic dispute. Don't send a police officer, send an agency. Send a human resources person, right? So let me just ask you, let's go through it real quick. Like, so under your scenario, we don't have a cop pulling people over for speeding, say. What would that person's job description be? It's no longer a police officer?
Just traffic enforcement. So they can't perform arrests. They can't perform investigations. The only thing they can do is give tickets.
So it's like a meter maid.
Kind of, but only
Are
for
they
traffic
armed?
infractions rather than parking. No.
They armed?
No. And
Okay,
why
so
would
what
they have
happens?
to be?
What happens then? What happens when the person that they pull over and say, "Here's a $300 ticket"? As we've seen a litany of videos show, they start to get aggressive with the person. Then what do? They're not armed. Now what happens?
Well, then leave, and then you have their license plate, and then if you have a recording or you report what they did, then find them later or arrest them.
This truly is San Francisco policing, and so you can see what
Okay,
happens when you disincentivize punishing these sorts of crimes. You will
It's
likely
not
see a
disincentivizing
vast-
punishing. It's going about
Sure it
it
is.
in a different way that leads to less conflict. There's a reason why in a lot of cities and jurisdictions they've gotten rid of police chases, especially with motorcycles, because the likelihood of a death is so high. If you have the person's license plate, who cares? Get them later. By having a police chase, all you're doing is increasing the likelihood of a cop smashing into a civilian or the person in the chase smashing into another innocent person, killing them or killing themselves. Get their license plate, get them later. Who cares?
It's not that simple,
we
right?
do
Then
this
who
already.
are we sending?
We literally, it is that simple. The police forces are literally doing this already. I don't know why you can't also apply that to other situations like traffic stops. Like that probably would have, if we did this, Tyre Nichols would probably be alive. Other officers would probably be alive. Do you think criminals, knowing if they get pulled over for a traffic infraction, knowing that the traffic enforcer can't conduct an investigation, can't arrest them, do you think they're going to pull out a gun? Probably not. And the likelihood of police
They'll flee.
getting
They'll
shot...
They'll attack.
Well, who
they might
cares?
pull
Then
out a gun. They're clearly, in a lot of these incidents,
No.
Yes,
Listen,
yes.
it's a complete myth that...
You pulled
Listen, it is a complete...
I'll leave you finish, but you're wrong.
Wait. It is a complete myth that traffic stops are even dangerous. Again, COVID is more likely to kill a police officer than all job-related deaths combined. So the idea that traffic stops are
falling
so
downstairs,
dangerous, we need armed officers to conduct basic traffic stops, or if somebody didn't put on their blinker, we need a cop to do that. That's just fucking ridiculous. And
it's
I think
funny. I like how we talk about. I
problem
like
is
how we talk about
pretextual
these
stops.
things. I like how we talk about these things. So we need to have these conversations because no one's having it. So I believe it was YouGov, though I could be wrong about the polling agency, that did a poll after the George Floyd situation in 2020, and it polled people and said, "How many unarmed black people are shot and killed by police a year in your estimation?" And over 50% of Democrats said over 1,000. You know what the actual number was? 18. Right? So when we're talking, more people die slipping on banana pills that are unarmed that are killed by the police in these stops. And yet you want to completely change the way we do these things and have these constant conversations that are used as a bully pulpit to beat people over the head and accuse people of racism anytime that someone of a person of color is. And then we're not even getting to the offensive reasons why that's bad. Not only is it bad for these inner city black communities, but now we see actually that this sort of cultural Marxism and deeming one group as victims and the other group as oppressed, it's leading to whitelining, where now mortgage companies are saying, well, we won't lend to white people. It's leading to government agencies that are issuing policies that they claim are life-saving or giving monies out to people, but only people of color, not white people. And this has a negative effect directly on the people that they're directly affecting, but it also creates a culture that makes people dependent on the government in this perpetual victim class, which ends up making those cultures even worse, which we could see happening with people of color. So, again, I would be interested to see your evidence that violent crime is lowered in San Francisco over the past couple years. I would be interested to see that. And I would also implore people to understand that what will happen, the idea that these traffic stops can't be violent. Imagine a drunk driver speeding down the road, right? In an inner city neighborhood where children are playing on the streets. We're going to send the meter maid to stop them. There's no chance when you pull over that driver that's possibly on substances that he'll get violent or do something irrational. Ignore the videos you've seen of people that were drunk attacking police officers and trying to take their guns or pulling weapons. That wouldn't happen. And if you don't like it, they'll just flee and you could just let them go. And if they happen to run over a kid because they're on a drunken bender or they're committing some other sort of unsafe driving offense, oh well, at least we didn't have the police there. This is nonsensical. I don't disagree that there are some things like civil forfeiture laws and things like that police have incentives to pull people over this shit, and that's bad. And we should do our best to limit that. But the idea of creating different people that aren't officers, I think would be better set to actually train officers in order to behave in better ways. But that also goes the other way. We need to do our best to stop spreading this narrative that these police are bloodthirsty people that are specifically targeting black people when it's just not true. We're even doing it to black cops when we have no evidence, just saying, my gut feeling is there's a 25% chance it was racism.
It is absolutely true that police are, in general, targeting black people. Black people are far more likely to be wrongfully accused of crimes. They're more likely to get more severe convictions, even though like socioeconomic status and prior criminal history have been adjusted for. If you look at some of the marijuana convictions, white and black people use marijuana at the same rates, but black people are far more likely to be arrested for weed. Like, they're clearly, there's a litany of evidence proving that police are targeting black people.
But again, so there's a lot of questions. Anytime you take a data set and say, this proves it, you have to ask, what are the variables that could lead to that? So I could say it's quite likely that black people tend to have less access to greater lawyers.
Nobody
right?
looks at raw data.
Okay, well, you just did. You just said no. I'm not.
You're using the raw data fallacy.
If you'll let me finish, you just said black people get arrested for marijuana at higher disproportional sentences than white people. Well, is it because they're black, or is it because there's other factors?
Because they're targeted. Again, marijuana use among blacks and whites is the same. Black people are far more likely to be arrested for marijuana crimes. That's actually the case for a lot of drugs. During the 1990s,
that doesn't address my criticism.
It does. When
no, it
Biden made, it does. When
the
crime bill was made, when the crime bill was made, it was specifically made to target crack cocaine specifically. There wasn't one single felony arrest. There wasn't one single felony arrest of a white person over a 10-year period. It's black communities that are being targeted by police. Like, you can't tell me that there wasn't one single white person who was guilty of a felony possession or distribution of crack cocaine over that 10-year period.
The crack laws were made more significant than coke laws at the behest of inner city leaders that were tired of crack being a scourge on their towns and harming their children, and the gang culture that came along with it. So it was actually black people that wanted to keep their community safe that advocated for stricter laws. Whether you agree with those laws or not, the idea that there was some sort of disparity, that's because... But it does
I'm
matter
not talking about just a disparity. Not one single white person was convicted of a crack cocaine-related felony over that 10-year period. That's impossible.
What years were these? Can you give me the years?
Yeah, so from 1990 to 2000, you can't find it. I don't think you can find a single felony arrest.
I don't believe you. I think you're lying.
It's not... I'm not, and it's not...
I just want to get this on record. So when I was watching Cops, as you have admitted you watched it in 1997, and I see them stop at some truck stop and bring some white guy that's in a dress out of his truck who's smoking crack, you're saying, nope, they let that guy go. He wasn't charged for crack.
Yes, over a 10-year period when the crime bill was created, you can't find a single felony arrest with relating to crack cocaine charges of a white person.
How many black people were arrested under that felony?
A shit ton.
I just don't believe.
Remember the
I don't
exact
believe.
number.
I just don't believe this. I think that there's some interesting semantic argument going on here. That like the way I
I'm
know
pretty
that
sure it's
white
in the-
people were arrested for having crack. I refuse to believe that
Again,
cops were
it's
pulling
different.
over people. Right. That's what I'm saying. So that let me ask you this though. So it doesn't answer what I'm talking about variables and like there could be reasons for this stuff, which we'll get to in a minute. Don't worry. But would it be your
Well,
if I could
want
say
to-
real quick? So if I could
I
say
just
there's
wanna-
another
well,
group.
before we
if
go
I could say
forward,
there's
can I
another
just-
group that the please, you
Hang on,
clearly
hang on,
have
Rob.
something
Hang
very
on,
important
hang
to say.
on, hang on.
Well, I
Hang
want.
on.
So you made this claim that there could be other variables involved. You're using this raw data fallacy. If you look at any of the research on conviction disparities or arrest disparities, they factor in socioeconomic differences.
don't.
They factor in behavioral differences. Nobody looks at raw data. You're not just going
do
to
not.
find. Yeah, they do. You can literally look at some of these papers, and they'll tell you what adjustments they made to the data set. So
I've
that
looked
there's
at
an
I've
apples-to-apples
looked at
comparison.
many of those papers, and it's impossible for them to come to the conclusions that they want. But it doesn't matter anyways because even you're not just saying they've drawn this conclusion. You're citing the numbers, right? You're saying they were twice as likely and things like that. But let me ask you this: given that, right? If I could point to another group that the disparity was even greater, then you would admit that the cops have even more of a bias against that group, correct?
If you could prove that, if you can prove that, say, drug use is similar among groups, but arrests are far higher, then yeah, that would be extremely good evidence of.
So I don't have
like
this
a
study
bias
in
disparity.
I don't have this study in front of me. I could send it to you afterwards or look it up if you want. But according to the University of Michigan study, they found that although there is a disparity between white and black people, there is a far greater disparity in all things that we consider law enforcement: likelihood to be pulled over, likelihood to be arrested, likelihood to be convicted, length of sentence. A greater disparity than that of what blacks to whites. And you know what that disparity is? Men to women.
Yeah.
So would you admit that our police is biased against men, correct? Systemic bigotry
Certainly.
against men. You agree?
Well, certainly.
That's it, right? That's all it takes.
That's absolutely true.
So now I'm glad you admit it.
Well,
You're the first
for one
person. You're the
thing-
first person that I've heard admit this. So let me say what that does. I've really wanted to debate someone that said this. So what this does is it shows to all of you out there how nonsensical it is to believe these sort of disparities speak indicatively of the culture of police or whether it has to do with bigotry or something. Because every one of us listening know
Sure.
that men are more likely to commit violent crimes, more likely to engage in aggressive behaviors to police, more likely to not be able to have like sort of lawyers and stuff that women, because there's advocacy groups to help women with these sort of things. Like, we all know that, right? Now, that's not to say that there aren't legitimate things in the law enforcement system that negatively affect men, but the fact that my entire criticism here is that there are variables that could lead to these things. All he needs to know is, oh, there's a disparity between men and women. Yep, that proves
That's not
bigotry.
all I
That's
need
the
to
same
know.
level
You're
of
making the raw
analysis that
data
we have when it
fallacy
goes to
again.
race. I'm
You're
not. You
making
keep
the raw
using
data
words
fallacy again.
Rob,
You're
Rob,
make-
let him respond. Let him respond, Rob.
You're
Let
making
him
the raw
respond.
data fallacy again. When you conduct research on, say, arrest disparities between men and women, you have to look at things like actual convictions. You also have to look at things like the amount of interactions with police. All this research accounts for that. You're never going to see a study that publishes just raw data with no adjustments to the data. So yeah, if you look at this, if you account for the amount of interactions with men and women in the police, women are far less likely to be arrested. In the courtroom, they're more likely to get favorable sentencing. I think especially when it comes to sexual-related crimes like sex assault and molestation. If a woman, say, molests a child, they're far less likely to get a harsh sentence than a man will. So that is a fact. There is a bias in favor of women by law enforcement and the court system. But
you admit that
it is also a
bias-
fact that men are more likely to commit violent crime. Women are less likely to speed when driving. Like, all these things are true, but you don't just find these raw data sets and without any adjustments or any consideration for confounding variables.
So what you're committing is the fallacy of lefties that use the word fallacy. Like, that means that they're making some sort of intelligent argument. It's a dime a dozen. I see you people do it all the time. Why don't you send me the study that you're talking
saying
about?
something that's
Send me
untrue.
one of the studies you're talking about, and let's go through their methodology to see how they were successfully able to eliminate all these variables. Go ahead.
Well, it would be relatively easy. I don't want to have this to be too academic, but the point I'm making is when there's research on things like disparities when it comes to arrests and convictions, other factors are taken into account than just simple environmental associations. So, like, again, when you're looking at severity of punishment when it comes to the difference between men and women, they're going to factor in crimes committed, severity of the crime, prior criminal history, and socioeconomic status, and also race is involved. So you can adjust for all those factors and have an apples-to-apples comparison, and then, yeah, when you crunch the numbers, you will see with remarkable consistency that women do get lesser sentences for committing the same crime, even with similar criminal history.
All right,
Same
I
with,
read the
same
studies I
associations
read.
can be made with between
Right.
white and black.
The studies I read said actually white people are disproportionately affected by police, and it factored everything in. So that's the studies
Sorry?
I read. The studies I read said that actually white people are more once you factor everything in, white people are more negatively affected by policing. There's a bias against them. So,
Do you mean in police shootings?
I mean all across the board. And the studies themselves
never-
said right there, they said we took everything into account. We did. So you concede then. No, you might say,
Are you
well,
just
that's interesting.
making
That
a
seems
joke about me.
No,
not
it's not
providing
making
any
a joke.
research?
It's you're providing a target. You're making definitive claims about something, right? And you're saying, well, they said they factored everything out. I'm telling you, I've had in-depth debates on these specific studies, right? Which is why I'm asking you to provide one of these studies. Let's look at the methodology and see how they were able to, apples to apples, zero out all variables. Because almost every study will admit that it's
Well-
impossible to eliminate all variables. But you're going that step forward. You're saying you've seen studies that have
I'm
eliminated
not
all
saying that.
variables.
That's a straw man.
What did you say then?
So I didn't say you can eliminate all variables. Every study is going to have limitations. What I said is you're never going to see a study that just looks at raw data and just presents an environmental association they found. You can look at variables and adjust for those variables in the data set. That's all I said. And that's the only argument I made. What you are saying is none of these studies are worth anything because, just because you can find an association of black people being arrested more, that doesn't mean anything. You can adjust for these things in research and actually determine if there is bias involved.
Okay, I'm done talking about the research because you don't have it in front of you don't have anything in front of us, so it's
Well,
easy
I'm
to
not
just
talking
say.
about
I'm just
any
saying
specific study.
Right, but I'm saying it's easy for them to say we did this. We're not just looking at the data. We did our best to eliminate variables. There's nothing to talk
Well,
about there.
you can look
let's,
at the methodology
let's move the
in the study
conversation
and
somewhere.
show.
Let's move the conversation somewhere more productive. Would you agree that the disparity between men and women is worse than the disparity between whites and blacks, as the data has shown?
I'm relatively certain that's true. I vaguely remember hearing something about that before and looking into it. But okay.
Okay, so
I don't know what that
if
has
the
to do
point
with-
is, so if the point is, even in this Tyre Nichols situation where we just have a gut feeling that maybe racism had something to do with it, but it's important to have that conversation, even though that's a conversation that we have over and over again. My question to you is, amongst
Well, it's
people
not.
in positions of power in our institutions, how many times do they have the conversation about systemic bigotry against men in law enforcement? How many times have you heard that conversation?
Well, very little.
Okay,
But,
so given that
again,
you
we're
know
talking about
that,
the Tyre Nichols
right,
case.
cool. Was Tyrese Nichols a man?
Yeah.
So it's weird that you didn't approach this saying, well, the greater disparity is that he was a man as opposed to a woman, as opposed to black to white. And less people are talking about that. So I'm going to say that I think systemic bigotry against men is what factored in to this. It's weird you didn't take that approach. I wonder why.
Sure, it could have. I didn't take that approach because I wanted to have a discussion specifically about within race racism.
Okay, but well, how about within male bigotry against men? You didn't want to have that conversation?
No, not in particular.
Well, it's weird because you said, even though you can't prove anything of racism in the Tyre Nichols situation, you just thought it was important because no one's having this conversation. So you thought it was important that we reference it and talk
Well,
about
look,
it. So,
I don't think anybody would consider that if this was a small white woman getting pulled over, they wouldn't have beaten the shit out of her. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, but I am seeing a large disagreement especially within the conservative community, that it's impossible that this was racially motivated. Like you have Pierce Morgan, huge networks, saying that it wasn't race. This was just bad cops. Race wasn't involved, and race very likely was involved. And I think there's enough pieces to the puzzle to fit into a picture that, yeah, a combination of systemic racism, internalized racism, maybe just being in a hierarchical system where they're police and they've been thought to be above other people, and they ended up separating themselves from the community and other black people. Like, all these things are likely involved, and I think it fits a good enough picture where we can acknowledge that this likely happened, and maybe we can do things and structure law enforcement in a slightly different way, or go through different recruitment and training strategies to avoid problems like this.
Okay, I'm very likely going to have steak for dinner tomorrow. What % chance do you think that would be?
I have no idea.
Well, if I said that to you colloquially as human beings, like we're not debating, we're just friends, and we're neighbors, we're out getting the mail, and you say, hey man, what are you having for dinner tomorrow? And I said, very likely going to have steak. Would you say, oh, there's a 25% chance Rob's going to have steak? Is that what you would say?
I don't know.
You would probably say very likely means more than half chance. Very likely to me, when I hear someone say that, like more likely than not. That's what very likely means. So you keep saying, like people like Piers Morgan that said, I don't see evidence of racism. To me, this is evidence of bad policing. You're like, well, I think that's wrong because it's very likely race was the factor. And then when I'm like, well, what percentage do you put it? You're like 25%. That doesn't sound like very likely to me. That sounds like a chance.
If we were playing Russian roulette and there was a 6-cylinder revolver and I put a bullet in the gun, would you say there's a pretty likely chance that if you put the gun to your head and pulled the trigger, you'd die?
No, I wouldn't use the term very
It's
likely.
only about a 15% chance, so
right, I just
not
told you
very
no.
likely, right?
Right.
So, I mean, likely is kind of a vague general term. I think a 25% likelihood is pretty likely.
Well,
There's a
would
1
you
in
say
4
then,
chance of it
if
happening.
you had to, okay, so if there's a 1 in 4 chance and you had to bet your life savings on whether or not this was racism or not, what would you do?
Sorry, say that again?
If you're saying there was a 1 in 4 chance that this was because of racism and you had to bet your life savings, either it was racially motivated or it wasn't, where would you put your money?
Well, if it's a 1 in 4 chance, then the greater likelihood would be that it's not. I'm not saying
Right,
that
so
there's a
then
greater likelihood.
I don't see then the getting upset for people saying, I don't see evidence that this was racism. It looks like it was bad policing. When you yourself are admitting, hey, there's a 75% chance that's the case. And by the way, I
Well,
disagree
what
with
I
your
want
number
people-
of 25%, but I'm just saying using your numbers.
Well, again, if you look at my debate introduction, I just wanted people to acknowledge that there's a fairly high likelihood that this is a possibility. And even if it can't be proven, I don't think it'll ever be proven, it is an important discussion to have, because racial discrimination by the police force isn't just going to be committed by white officers. It's also going to be committed by black officers. So again, I think it's important to have this discussion because it'll inform recruitment, training, what jobs the police should really hold to eliminate these biases.
Okay, do you think that since we've been having an uptick in these sort of racial conversations, since maybe, say, Trayvon Martin, right, and Chris Brown and through the works, do you think that our country overall has gotten better or worse?
Well, probably better overall. Like, I mean, aren't we at a kind of at a peak when it comes to economic?
Well, I guess let me be. Well, no, economically, people's purchasing power is way down. Actually, in recent polling, it's the lowest the lowest number in 40 years of people that said they're worse off this year than they were last year. But I guess let me be more specific. It's my fault for being too vague in the question there. Are we better off when it comes to racial issues?
Probably. I think it's good that it's being talked about.
So
And I think
just think that,
people who are victims of racism now have more recourse.
I think that that's the opposite of the truth, and it's hard to measure these sort of things. But all polling that there are places that poll this every year, race relations in the country. The distrust amongst the races amongst each other is approaching highs that we haven't seen since the 60s and 70s. Distrust amongst law enforcement, for example, is hitting levels that we haven't
You
seen
should
for decades.
distrust
Violent
law
crime in these
enforcement.
inner city, violent crimes.
Everybody
that we see in
should
these inner
distrust
cities are
law
going-
enforcement.
But not distrust in that they're systemically racist and pulling me over for a parking ticket, so I'm going to flee because I think they're going to execute me. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy that encourages people to flee. What you should be distrusting is to comply to the best of your ability.
Tyre Nichols was killed. Do you think you should have distrusted those police?
I think he shouldn't have
Do
fled.
you think he should have ran
I think he should have
faster?
complied. No, I think he shouldn't have ran.
He did comply.
No, he didn't. He ran.
Sorry, he did comply.
He did not.
Did you
He
see
ran.
the Did you see the
I did.
stop?
Yes.
Yeah, so when
Did he run from
people
police?
are giving the initial stop, he was given 37 conflicting orders.
Okay.
They were making no fucking sense. They were being incredibly aggressive. Like when a guy gets murdered by these people who are apprehending him, don't you think there might have been a reason that he ran in the first place?
Was running
It's
one
like who's the crazy kid?
Real quick, was running one of the issues that orders they issued to him?
No, but okay,
So he didn't comply.
so when you see a story like Elliot Rodger shooting and committing a mass killing, is it any wonder that women kind of didn't like him? Do you think, like, with the way the police acted, there's a reason why the guy ran?
Maybe. Let me be clear here. Right?
The guy
I'm not
was
saying,
like these people were
if I could have a moment
murderers,
to,
and he
right,
ran
give me an
from
explain,
them.
they weren't murderers at the time that he ran. So let me say, I think that the police were acting intense and giving conflicting orders. I think this happens a lot with police, by the way, which their adrenaline's so high that they're shouting shit out. Like they might, for example, say, "Now stand up," but you can't because the way your arms are positioned and shit like. And that's definitely a problem, right? But what I'm saying is the answer is not running from them. That's not. That's going to exacerbate. If you already know that these people are
He should have
unhinged,
ran
that's gonna,
faster.
No, he shouldn't have. That exacerbated the situation, right?
No, it
shouldn't
didn't.
have ran. Yes, it did. What you should do, the best thing you should do, is try to the best of your ability to comply, and then have your day in court. Sue them for
buddy,
millions of dollars. Have your day in
these
court.
people
That's
were
but
murderers.
please let me finish, right? So I'm not defending the police in this and saying that they're orders.
No,
that
hang
they
on,
were issued.
hang on, Rob. I'm not saying that you can't finish, but we're trying not to have such a one-sided conversation. You've talked about twice the amount of time that Vegan Gains has now. I understand some of the reasoning for that is because there's been a lot of questions asked back and forth, and VG styles to ask a lot of questions in order to get to his various points. So that might have a lot to do with it, but let's try to make it a little bit more even, Steven, as we go, okay?
Sure.
Yeah, so, like, I compare this to a situation like Elliot Rodger, where Elliot Rodger was wondering, why don't girls like me? I'm the supreme gentleman. He goes up and shoots a bunch of people, commits a mass killing. It's obvious why women didn't like him. Do you really think if a girl were to date Elliot Rodger and he finally got his wish of getting a girlfriend, this guy isn't a fucking danger and probably would have murdered somebody?
No.
Like, it's a similar situation. Like, when you see the cops, how they behaved and how they beat the ever-living fuck out of Tyre, I don't see, like, it as a very good argument saying that, oh, well, if he had just, like, been a fish and, like, done nothing, he would have lived. I'm not so sure. These people were fucking crazy wackos. They clearly had a problem with him right when they made the stop. It was clearly a bogus stop as well. They stopped him for no reason. I don't know what the issue they had was. Again, I'm suspicious that they might have thought he was someone else, or there is still that unconfirmed rumor that he was in an affair with one of the officers' wives. But it was a very bizarre situation, and it is perfectly reasonable for him to have run away. And the fact that he's dead, where he was brutally, viciously fucking beaten by 5 officers who literally weighed twice as much as he did, I think he was well within reason to run from these people.
Do you think that the actions of I don't understand what you're saying about Elliot Rodger, so I'll just put it this way. A Black Lives Matter supporter murdered 5 police officers in Dallas. Do you think cops are right to be distrustful of Black Lives Matter protesters?
No.
Okay.
He wasn't really a Black Lives Matter protester. I know who you're talking about. He was a crazy black kid who was watching the Young Turks. It was when Jimmy Dore was on their program. It was particularly Jimmy Dore. They were making video after video saying like police are hunting down black people. This kind of crazy unhinged kid got it into his head that black people are literally going to kill his family, and then he committed a mass shooting. He was more radicalized by some of the crazy shit the Young Turks was saying, and if you saw his videos, I've seen them, he was unhinged. Young Turks actually put a copyright claim on his channel to delete all of them, but I saw them before they were deleted. The kid was clearly already mentally unhinged, and he wasn't actually a Black Lives Matter activist. He just said he supported Black Lives Matter.
But if we're talking fallacies,
he wasn't a Black Lives Matter activist. He never attended any meetups. He never protested with Black Lives Matter. He just said he supported Black Lives Matter.
Okay. Another question, right? So we're talking about what these people should have done initially. You keep saying they were murderers, so he was justified to run, but they weren't murderers at the time that they were asking him to comply with these things.
Right,
So
and Elliot Hulse, or not Elliot Hulse, Elliot Rodger was not a murderer when he was trying to get a girlfriend. Do you think there might have been a pattern of behavior which was kind of a red flag to these women that this guy is fucking crazy, just like how Tyre Nichols kind of saw some red flags that these police officers might have wanted to fucking kill him?
I mean, this comparison makes no sense. I'll just get to the end of it, right? No sense bearing the lead. Your recommendation right now to black people that find the police that are pulling them over that are sketchy is to run.
In Tyree's case, certainly. And by the way, there are cases where police were actually unlawfully stopping people, putting them in danger, and they fought back. And they actually won these court cases because it was proven these police put them in so much danger that they had no choice but to fight back or run. So there are cases where this has happened.
It's funny that you would criticize Jimmy Dore for potentially radicalizing people. I think it's one of the most dangerous, terrible things for someone to come on here and give the advice to people that they should run from police because even black
If you feel like your life is in danger and that is a safer option, then yes, certainly. Even other police officers will tell you that. My ex-next-door neighbor was a police officer. He was talking about other people in his department being fucking wackos, and he was talking about how, yeah, sometimes you should run away from the police. Some of them are fucking psychopaths.
Yeah, that's advice that I hope everyone listening here thinks that I win this debate.
Any
because
cop,
it's very rare.
Ask any lawyer.
It's very rare that I say this, but I think the actual two sides of this debate have real-world implications that could literally get you killed. Don't run from the police.
Running for your life is radical. So if the police are showing every indication that they have an intention to murder you, what if the police say, we're going to actually put you in the back of our car, drive you to a fucking lake, shoot you in the back of the head, and kill you? Should you run?
Like, if there's
enough evidence that it is safer to either run or fight back, is that not a better idea?
Okay, so let's say that me and you sit down and I had 20 clips of police officers, right? And in those clips, I'm going to show 2 minutes of the police officer's interaction, right? Then pause it and say, should this person run or not, right? You would be comfortable that you would nail that 20 out of 20 times?
Okay, so I just asked you a hypothetical. If you could conclude with reasonable certainty that it is safer to run or fight back because your life is in danger than to just comply, because if you comply, you will be killed, what is the better option? And by the way, it is outlined in the hypothetical that it is safer to run or fight back. What's the better option?
The problem is you're not omnipotent, so you wouldn't have that. And the greater set of averages show that you have greater set of averages.
Who the fuck cares? If somebody says they're going to fucking take you to a lake and shoot you in the back of the head, like, there are situations where you can certainly ascertain it's safer to run or fight back. Like, there are cases where officers are smothering a suspect, literally choking them to death. Obviously, they have to fight back.
Okay, so let me answer this hypothetical, and then I'll ask if you'll answer one for me. Fair enough?
Sure.
Okay, so if a police officer told me, put your hands behind your back, we're taking you in the back of my car, then I'm going to put my gun in your mouth and pull the trigger and blow your brains out. Should I try to flee? That's basically what you're asking?
Certainly.
Yes, you should try to flee. Now, similarly, what if that same situation happens to you, but they also say, and if you run, we're going to nuke the entire world because we're really aliens? Would you run? Answer the hypothetical.
Are they aliens?
Right? What they're going to? We know at the end of the day they really are aliens. They're going to nuke the entire world. So would you run?
So if they are aliens and you run, they'll nuke the world.
Right.
So you and everyone else would die.
Correct.
But the other alternative, then I guess the more the more sensible option would just be to go in the back of the car, get executed.
Okay, cool. Then don't run from the
What
cops. Right?
point does this make?
Right, exactly. That's the point. Your ridiculous analogy
if
that
you're-
if the police, yes, clearly we could admit, if a police officer says, I'm about to execute you, I'm about to shoot you in the head, that is a different situation than people subjectively thinking, this cop's being aggressive to me, therefore I think he's going to murder me, therefore I'm going to run. That advice, when you tell people, if you subjectively feel that you're going to be endangered by these police officers, well, a huge proportion of people, particularly in the black community, feel anytime they get pulled over, their life's in danger. Now you've just given them carte blanche to run from the police, which ironically makes it more likely that their life is in danger.
No. Reasonable people can sense if their life is in danger. Do you think if George Floyd had the power to get off of his chest and turn over, he should have?
Yes.
Okay, well, there you go.
Should
have
he
fought
resisted?
back and resisted the
Should he have
police.
resisted the whole time? According to you, he should have.
Initially, he shouldn't have resisted. He should have complied.
They were
But
murderers.
Given the
He
circumstance,
could sense they were murderers.
well, given the circumstance he was in, where he literally couldn't breathe and he was slowly suffocated to death, if he had the power to resist, you would agree it would have been in his benefit to resist. And
It would
at
have been
least
It would have been
push
his
the
benefit
police
to get
officer
the
off.
officer off his back, right? But let's
Yeah.
use this analogy. I'm glad that you used this example because at one point he was safely in the back seat of the police car, but he knew they were murderers, right? Like just like you could tell they were murderers.
no, he was just trying to leave, and he might have also been on drugs. And
But wait
not
a minute,
thinking
we know
clearly.
they were murderers, right? You admit that Derek Chauvin was a murderer, right?
Do you know what a straw man is?
I do.
Okay, so why are you going down this line of questioning?
I'm not strawmanning. You're saying in the situation of Tyre Nichols that he reasonably knew that he was going to be murdered by these people, so he fled.
He
right?
was
But in the-
murdered, so we know.
So was George Floyd. So he knew he was going to be murdered. So he was right to get out of the car.
His actions clearly weren't committed with that knowledge in mind.
Right.
Whereas
Just
with
like Tyre
Tyre
Nichols
Nichols-
wasn't. No. Tyre Nichols didn't
ran.
run. No.
Tyre
That's
Nichols
not
ran to his mother's house and was calling out for his fucking mom, dude.
So what? Because he didn't
Like
want to go
George
to jail.
Floyd. No, it was because he thought he was fucking going to be fucked up by these crazy wackos, and he
He
thought
didn't
his
know that they were
mom
gonna
was the
murder
only person he could call out for help.
He didn't know that they were going to murder him. You're speaking because you've seen
He-
the end result. And so you're speaking. But maybe if he wouldn't have ran, what do you think the chances were that
Why
they
do you
kill
think
him?
he ran to
I'm-
his
Let me
mom's
finish
house
my
and was
question real
calling
quick.
out for his
What do you
mom?
think the
Why do you
chances
think he
are
ran
that
to
what
his mom's house?
What do you think the
Why do
chances
you think
are?
he
Hang
ran
What
to
do you
on,
his
think?
mom's house?
guys. We got to do one at a time.
Why
We're
do
gonna
you
start
think
with
he
Vegan
ran to
Games.
his mom's house?
Okay, I guess we'll answer your question first, and then you can answer mine. I think he ran to his mom's house because he was worried about an interaction he had. He may be going to jail. He may be roughed up more. I don't know. Could be any litany of those things. Maybe he thought he was going to prison for a long time because he resisted arrest and fought back against the police.
Resisting arrest is nothing. He also didn't resist, clearly. And the
Okay,
traffic
now
stop
you'll
was
answer.
bogus.
Now I forget what the question I was going to ask specifically was. It's neat how you could do that though. Interrupt someone when they're devastating you to try to do this stuff. But the question I had is, what do you think the chances were that he would have been killed if he wouldn't have ran?
Still pretty high, judging by the way they were acting. I think they would have
Define pretty high.
beaten up regardless. I'm
I
not
don't-
sure. I don't know if I could put an exact number on it, but clearly, since he
ballpark.
did in fact get murdered, these people were fucking murderers. They likely
Ballpark.
would have still beaten the shit out of him.
So you think
Like, they
80%
literally-
chance?
Buddy, they had their body cameras on. There were
Okay.
fucking traffic cameras, and while all these cameras were rolling, they beat the absolute fuck out of him to the point where he fucking died.
Okay, so my
Like,
question
I don't
to you
know.
is,
I don't know.
do you think
if,
they would have
like,
beat him less? Do you think they would have beat him less if he wouldn't have ran?
I don't know. But
You don't, that's
clearly,
right.
he was within reason to try to run away and get help.
They weren't beating him as severely before he ran, correct?
Okay. Do you think if a woman is getting raped and she tries to run away and then she gets murdered by the rapist and like raped more severely, well, if he didn't run, maybe he would have still been alive. Like, this is literally the same fucking reasoning. It's just
Didn't you just
these
ask me if
people
I
were
knew what a
fucking
straw-
murderers. They were acting like fucking wackos, and he was well within reason to run away, clearly, and we know he was well within reason because of the fucking outcome of events.
Yeah, you just asked what straw men were. It's clear you know where they are.
That's
Yes,
not
if
a
someone's
straw
raping
man.
you-
I made an analogy.
If someone's raping you, you have the potential. You should try to get away. If a law enforcement officer is detaining you and being a dick and shoving you around, no, you
But
shouldn't
if you
run
just
away.
let yourself get raped, then the rapist won't have any reason to attack you harder, right?
It's a completely different situation.
Like
A law
when
enforcement
it's a
officer-
bogus traffic, buddy.
It's-
When there's a bogus fucking traffic stop, these people are acting incredibly fucking aggressively. They already actually started hitting him. You can see in the body cam footage when he was just on the ground, completely complying. He's well within reason to run away. Okay,
He's not.
and then
He-
saying
he's not-
it's
he's not-
his fault. Part of it's his fault because he
It
ran
is.
away. Oh, they wouldn't have beat him so bad if he didn't run away.
That's-
If he didn't run away, he would have still been alive. So I
true.
guess it's his fault. Like, okay, when a rape victim runs away, then the rapist gets mad and fucking murder. Well, I guess it's the rape victim's fault. You should just sit back, relax, let him do his business, and then you'll probably be safe, right? Same line of fucking reasoning. It's ridiculous. We know based on the end outcome that he was well within reason to run away. These people were incredibly fucking dangerous.
You could keep making this poor rape analogy. It doesn't make sense because the rapist was never acting in even a potential lawful way. He was also violating.
The
you
cops
at
weren't
the
acting in
time.
a
Please,
lawful way. The
please.
cops were
He was
not
a-
acting in a lawful way. The traffic
you
stop
tell
was
me when I'm allowed to
bogus.
talk.
The traffic stop was bogus, and we know that.
Go ahead, Rob.
Okay. There's a complete difference between a person who is not law enforcement encroaching in the most forcible way imaginable, committing rape, a sexual offense against you, than law enforcement potentially pulling you over when they have the legal authority to pull you over, but maybe they went outside the bounds in that particular case. That is a complete different comparison, right? You shouldn't run from the police. You are giving advice to people that will lead to more people being harmed and killed, and you ought to be ashamed of it. And you're not doing particularly good in this debate anyways. You're talking about things, I have a gut feeling, but when it crosses the line into giving advice to people to run from police officers, I think that it's really a serious thing. And you should do a little more soul searching before you give this sort of advice that could literally be to someone harmed. I think
I'm
you'd feel terrible
not
if you
the
found out someone
only-
listened, took this advice,
The
and went out and actually
only
then had a bad
advice-
interaction.
The only advice I'm giving is that if it is safer to resist and run away than it is to comply, then you should run away. And I think since we know the outcome of the Tyre situation, he was well within reason to run away. We know the outcome.
George Floyd was right to get out of the backseat of the cop car, correct?
These are totally different situations.
We know
where
the
people
outcome.
resisted for completely different situations.
Here's what gets me, right? Like, so you say we can't compare one person who we know the outcome that died to another person that ruined the outcome.
They
that
resisted
died, that both
for
tried to
completely
flee.
different
But we
reasons.
can
George Floyd
compare.
didn't resist
We can
for
compare
the
to
same
a
reason.
rapist. We can compare
George
to a
Floyd
rapist.
didn't
It's
resist for the same
nonsensical.
reason.
It doesn't.
George
No two
Floyd
situations are the
did
same.
not
That
resist for the same reason.
Okay.
No
hang on,
two
hang on,
people
hang on.
resist
You
Yeah,
realize
we
there
gotta start
are
with Rob here, Vegan, because you guys were talking over each other. Go ahead, Rob.
sure.
No two people ever resist for the same reason, right? They both probably in that moment, one might have been inebriated, but they both in that moment thought that in fact, they were crying out for their mom. They both thought that they were being aggressed upon by unfair, aggressive police officers, and both sought to aggress that situation. And even if you say those two comparisons aren't apples to apples, the gall of you to make that, and then at the same time make the comparison of comparing the cops to someone raping a woman and her trying to escape is really evident for everyone watching just how disingenuous you're being.
Yeah, so George Floyd resisted arrest for a completely different reason. Tyre Nichols also was initially compliant, and he ran away, likely when he realized he was in a lot of fucking danger, and he ran towards his mother's house so that he could get help and maybe be saved by his mom. Totally different situation than George Floyd, who was literally just acting up and trying to get out of the situation because he knew with his prior arrests he'd probably be in big trouble.
All right, we got to stop it. We got to stop the debate there. You guys may not realize this, but we've been going for an hour 45. All right, it's gone pretty long already. But I have a bunch of super chats to get to first, and then we're going to take on callers, of course. Before we do that, though, Want to make sure that mods send out the call-in link in chat. And if you want to get a call in, now's the time to hop in, and you'll get vetted by the mods and you can come into the Discord. But we're going to move into the closing statements. As Vegan Gains, you open first. I'm going to give you the opportunity to close last. And Rob, I'm going to give you the opportunity to close first. Go ahead.
So, I mean, I appreciate it. It was a spirited debate, and I actually enjoyed the conversation, so I thought it was fun. There's a lot of things that we never talk about of actual systemic racism and bigotry against the groups I talked about, which, once more, we didn't get into that conversation of whitelining, didn't get into the conversation of the CDC, didn't get into the conversations on attacks against Christianity, men, heterosexuality, and all that sort of stuff, literally directly from these institutions. Instead, once more, for the 50th time, we're having a conversation about potential systemic racism. Okay, fine, no problem. I think that, I mean, what's really the debate to be had? He concedes at the beginning. He only gives it a 25% chance that race had something to do with it. And his strongest evidence is black guys use the N-word. I mean, it's just kind of laughable, and it's really something that I think illustrates how out of hand these things have gotten. Everything could always be potential evidence of racism, and we always have to talk about it, always. I think that there were factual things, even though we talked a lot about potential studies and stuff. And let me steel man Vegan Gains. I didn't present any studies either, so I'm not, in these sort of things, it gets boring to just go through these studies. But these declarative statements that, all of this is settled and the studies do this and have, done their best to eliminate the variables just isn't always the case. I think that, a lot of the suggestions that were offered here are just nonsensical. And I do have to get serious for a moment. If you take nothing away from this, please take this away. Comply with the police to the best of your ability. Have your day in court. I'm not saying there's a 100% chance that nothing bad will happen to you, but you're almost always going to make the situation worse by trying to flee in that matter, and it's going to escalate the situation. And the problem is with what Vegan Gains, and this is a serious egregious thing that he's doing here, because literally his words, if someone's influenced by his words or the people like him, will lead to people dying, like that gentleman at Wendy's after the George Floyd situation that tried to flee, because he would have said in that moment, I felt that my life was in danger. The problem is that it's subjective. And we could see that there are people that legitimately feel, like, let's just go through the chain of events. Vegan Gains, through no evidence whatsoever, thinks that it's very likely that racism had a role in this. Well, it wouldn't be a stretch to think someone who thinks that the people that are arresting them are racist might legitimately feel that something bad's going to happen to them, that they could have violence against them. So that person might say, well, I feel that my health's in jeopardy, so I'm going to flee. When really, it could be that that person wasn't racist. He was just an angry cop because you did something that he didn't like and was a little rough with you. I myself have been thrown on the ground by a police officer and arrested and had blood coming out my nose. I could have said, this guy's a dick. He just had blood coming out my nose. I'm going to run. I'm going to do my best, which would have exacerbated it. Instead, I laughed and said someone filmed it. The officer was going to lose his job. He wiped the blood from my face, put me in the drunk tank, and I ended up getting the charges dropped later. But the idea that he's honestly suggesting, if you subjectively feel that your health's in danger because the cops are rotten bastards, then absolutely you should run, is one of the most dangerous things that I've heard people say in a debate that I've interacted with. This is terrible advice. And this is sort of the problem with the systemic racism crew that says that we always need to have this talk. They are actually making things worse for the very communities that they claim to want to help. It's making things worse. And so, no, we don't need to have these sorts of conversations. Instead, we should be having conversations about holding bad cops accountable, understanding that not everything is magically hand-waved away by saying systemic racism. Stop playing into these games that the people that are running this country want to do through this division, saying that we blame Christians, we blame white people, black people are perpetual victims, gay people are perpetual victims, trans people are perpetual victims, and creating these protected victimhood classes. All of this is part and parcel to this game led by people that aren't doing anything to benefit white people, black people, straight people, gay people, Christians, non-Christians, etc. And the more that we just say, I suspect that racism might possibly have something, so we need to talk about it. This conversation happens ad nauseum over and over and over again. So if you take anything away from the debate, it's this. We had a whole debate because someone feels that a black guy using the N-word is evidence that they're racist, and then he proceeded to tell you that if you feel that you're being jeopardized by police, that you should run from them. That is terrible advice. Please don't do it. And anyone that told Vegan Gaines, whether they be in law enforcement or otherwise, that told him that that was good advice to give, ought to be ashamed of themselves, because at least Vegan Gaines probably doesn't know better. But please do your best to comply. Doesn't justify what the police did. I started off the debate, and I'll end the debate by saying they acted terribly, and I hope that they get what they're deserved in the criminal justice system, but you should not be intentionally non-complying and trying to flee this situation, because you're only going to make it worse.
Thank you for that closing, Rob. Just to add just a quick bit of mirth, this guy Woody in the chat, I guess he doesn't like you very much, but he says, Rob's telling everyone not to run because he can't. I don't know why.
I challenge you to a race.
I thought that was funny.
It is
Vegan
funny.
Gaines, go ahead, man.
Yeah, so like I said at the beginning of the debate, my goal in this debate wasn't to convince you that this killing was racially motivated, but just that it is a realistic possibility that we should consider. And with that consideration, we should think of how this affects how we should conduct law enforcement, what jobs law enforcement should do, and what the scope of law enforcement should be. As far as whether or not, whether you're a minority or anybody being arrested by police, it's entirely sensible to resist an arrest or resist to some degree or run away if you genuinely feel like your life is in danger, which I think Tyre Nichols did. The fact is, it was a bogus traffic stop. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was initially compliant, and when the officers started using very strong language, threatening him, putting a taser on his body. I think one of them actually started beating him already when he was on the ground and not resisting. He ran away looking for to his mom for help. He was only a little bit away from her home. So I think he was well within reason to run away from the police, and all Rob did was to strawman me the whole time. He brought up the Wendy's situation where the guy tried to run away after he was going to be arrested for a DUI. He attempted to grab the cop's taser. Again, this person, Tyre, he was clearly in genuine physical danger, and I'm sure there's other people who were in genuine physical danger by the police, including George Floyd, which he admitted George Floyd probably should have resisted if he had the power to when he was put on his chest and somebody was sitting on his neck. So he agrees with me that under circumstances where you genuinely are in danger, you should resist arrest and perhaps flee. So that's all I have to say.
All right, appreciate that closing statement, Vegan Gaines. Now, we do things a little bit differently here at the Crucible. Though the closing statements are in, and we consider this portion of the debate to be closed, we still understand there's probably going to be a bit of spirited back and forth still between the debaters as we move through the callers and the super chats. We're just fine with that. I was going to do the super chats first and then go to callers, but there's only a couple of callers in the back line, so I'm going to bring them on first, and then I'll move over to the super chats because I just got a feeling that this is going to go on for a little bit. So, Adam Dole, can you hear me okay?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead with your question, sir.
Okay, I just have one for each of you. For Vegan Gaines, at what point, in your opinion, does somebody go from not a murderer to a murderer?
Well, by committing a murder, the thing is, though, you can get indices of somebody being a murderer with their actions. They can be extremely aggressive. They can be acting in a way where you think your life is in danger. I'm sure plenty of people have been in a room with somebody who was acting in a peculiar way like that, being extremely aggressive, hostile. They were able to escape. And then it turns out they were a serial killer. That happened to some of Dahmer's victims.
Oh, well, so I just want to see if I understand what you're saying. So can you be a murderer before you commit murder?
Well, you cannot have committed a murder because it hasn't happened. But if you are planning on committing a murder, or you're at a very high likelihood of committing a murder because you're unhinged, it's a bit of a semantic game, but I guess you could say somebody is a murderer if they're planning on committing a murder or if they're at a high likelihood.
Okay, yeah, that's all I wanted to ask you. And then Rob, pretty simple question: do you think there is ever a case at all where it would be a good idea to run from the police?
Yeah, if the cop says I'm about to take you out back and kill you, or if the cop's raping you, stuff like that, sure.
But if the cop's raping you and you just allow them to rape you, then you're less likely to get harmed in some other way. If they try to chase you, they might actually try to kill you. So shouldn't you just allow them to rape you?
No,
Wouldn't rape
it's a
be a lesser
completely-
degree of harm?
No, again, I find it ironic that the more apples to apples comparison of George Floyd, well, he thought that they were unhinged nuts, so he should have fled the car, which would lead to ultimately his death. You say that that's not a comparison.
another
but
straw
we
man.
have to talk about this. It's not a straw man. That's literally okay. You explain to me exactly. So you're saying, tell me what George Floyd should have done. He's in the back of the car. He knows that these cops are unhinged. They've already behaved in an aggressive way to him and violent towards him.
He didn't.
And now what's
George
he do?
Floyd. So the cops did not act unhinged towards George Floyd. He was trying to leave the car because he knew he was going to get arrested. It wasn't until he was on his chest with somebody kneeling on his neck that he was in a situation where, if he had the power to, yes, he should have resisted to some degree, which would
So you're
allowed
saying
him to breathe.
The interactions prior.
We've
to
already
him
gone
being
over
placed-
this. You're
No, we
just
haven't.
making
You're
shit
saying-
up. Like you also
I'm
brought
not.
up the Wendy's situation,
Right.
which was another completely disanalogous situation. The guy ran because he didn't want to get a DUI and he tried to steal the cop's taser.
Again, you can't know exactly what was in the thoughts of these people. My contention is this. It is more likely that they thought their situation, if they could look at Tyre Nichols, right, they would think their situation was more akin to that than them being held down and penetrated sexually by a police officer, which is the analogy you want to use.
No.
Yes, that's the analogy you keep going back
No.
to. Yes, that is.
No, I used that analogy as a point that you are blaming these people, Tyre Nichols specifically, for his murder.
I'm not.
If a woman was being raped by a police officer and she ran away and she got murdered, is she to blame for that murder?
No.
In both cases, their rights are being violated. Tyre was pulled over a bogus traffic stop. It was unlawful.
I do have one more question for Vegan Gains. What are you holding?
It's a cat toy.
Oh, okay. Yep, that's all. Thank you.
All right.
Will, can you hear me? Are you on the line?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead with your question, sir.
All right. So this is to Rob. So I think we've been talking too much about like the actual like the race, quote unquote, of like the 5 individuals, right? But what I'm most concerned about is like sort of the systemic issues that caused those 5 people to be there in the first place. So like the Scorpion group was like a group made up of like 40 or so individuals that were especially like designed to go into these like quote unquote high crime areas, and basically without any like sort of goals, right? They were just out there to like sort of fill in the gaps, quote unquote. So like I was just wondering if you think those specific like policies, right, that led to like the creation of the Scorpion group were based on like white supremacy, or at least like inspired by it.
No, I don't think they're
Well,
inspired by like. I'm sorry.
so-
I thought when he said my
so-
question first, Rob, I thought he meant me. Go ahead.
Oh, did you want to answer first?
Go ahead.
Okay. So just because a policy is created, it's not necessarily created for white supremacy reasons, because like whites are superior or anything. There could be good intentions in mind, but the policy turns out being racist or discriminatory in some way. I think with the Scorpion Squad, since it was a black woman who's the police chief there who actually formed the squad, she likely didn't have any racist intentions. She might have been emulating policies from other police departments, or maybe some superior of hers
Actually,
recommended.
the woman there, she actually made like another similar one in Georgia, and like there were some like issues there. That squad was like disbanded or like reprimanded or something, and then she
Yeah?
transferred there
Interesting.
to,
Okay.
to Memphis. So like it was, I think it might have been like her specifically to like
Sure.
sort of, or like the
Yeah.
mayor approved, but
So
yeah, I'm
I
saying,
think we
like,
can
sort of
say,
the laws itself rather than
yeah.
like behind it.
So I wouldn't say this was, like, at least in this instance, this was created for racist purposes, but I think it likely had racist outcomes. And at the very least, it creates just a bad situation where you have things like pretextual stops, cops that are overly aggressive for no fucking reason. They end up having a bad relationship, an adversarial relationship with a community. So it's not necessarily made for racist reasons, but there can be racist outcomes.
And
Want me to
caller,
answer the question?
Do you? Well, you
I mean, I
can,
sort of
Rob,
wanted
but
Rob to get chime in there as well. Sorry.
okay. Well, I was just going to ask you
I'm fine.
if you had
I'm
a wrap
fine
up
taking the
question,
call.
but that's fine. That's fine. Go ahead, Rob.
I'll be brief. Look, again, it's always this question: does systemic racism have something to do with it? Well, it depends on what you mean. I think there is systemic. People in positions of power in this country don't give a shit about the people of this country. There is systemic racism in the form of direct policies that are directed against, for example, white people that we could see in mortgage lending schemes or in divvying out funds to farmers or CDC divvying out vaccines or culture attacking white people, academia having entire courses dedicated to the evils of whiteness but none to the evils of blackness or, any other race or ethnicity. So these things happen. But it could be that the policies also have disproportionate effects on people of color? Sure, that could be the case. Is it also true that there were these sorts of policies were even worse in the past that were directed specifically at people of color? Sure. But let's phrase the question another way. Why is it that we could never talk about, increased police force, even if it's done terribly, even if the Scorpion Force was a bad idea and it wasn't implemented in a good way? It seems like anytime we talk about increased policing in neighborhoods of color, we say, that means that they're targeting people of color. Right. Well, why don't we look at it from the victimhood side? Maybe that means they're policing areas where there's predominantly black victims, and that's why there's an increased presence there because they care more about the black victims. But we never look at it that way. Anytime we talk about, for example, the disproportionate amount of violent crime in inner city black neighborhoods, you're accused of being a racist. But those crimes, the victims of those crimes are also disproportionately black. And so it seems oftentimes the narrative we're told is, if you're that mother that's trying to work 2 jobs and you have 3 kids and you happen to be black and you're living in inner city Memphis, tough shit. We can't talk about your son being a victim that was executed in some sort of gangland violence because that could be perceived as racist because the perpetrator was most likely black. So we don't want the police being able to target that neighborhood because it would disproportionately target black people. But what that means is, well, then the black victims are disproportionately not served by the police. So I'm not saying that this particular task force or the one that this woman had done in Georgia, which I know nothing about, was good. It's clear that these officers were shit. But the idea that just in general, having as Vegan Gain seems to illustrate or insinuate, the idea that, it wasn't directly systemic racism, but they were targeting disproportionately people of color. Well, no shit. Maybe it was they were disproportionately trying to get justice for victims that were people of color.
All right.
Thank you.
Will, thank you very much. Have a good day. Okay, so those are the only 2 callers. I appreciate both the call-ins, but I do have a bunch of super chats here that I want to get through. For $7.77 from Blitzkrieg Bear, I'm paying for 1/666 of what Vegan Gains has to pay. Oh God, pay. He says pay his gay away. Join the fun, folks, on Dono Chat so Andrew can buy his Bugatti. So I should have pre-read that one. To be honest with you, I should have. $3.99 comes in from Zach Morris. Question for Vegan Gains: are black people better off in the U.S. or are they better off in Africa?
It would they'd probably be better off in the U.S. I guess it would depend where in Africa. I know there's some very well-off people in certain areas. I know there's a lot of rich black people in like Nigeria, but it really depends. I'd say for the most part, yeah, most black people are probably going to be better off in the U.S.
Okay. $10 comes in from Redfish Bear. He sends no message with it. My favorite kind of super chat. Amptown for $4 says, Vegan Gains, just no. Which is a compelling argument. I guess compelling argument. $4 comes in from Killing Nolly. There was a cop who raped 18 black women, Danielle Holtzclaw. So by Rob's logic, if those women ran away, would they be resisting arrest?
No, rape's not arrest. I can't believe I have to spell this out for people.
So I'm just wondering, why is rape unique? Because Tyre Nichols was illegally stopped. So why is it okay to run away in cases of rape, but not when your rights are being violated in some other way?
Because rape takes all potential impact of law enforcement justifiably doing their job. So it might be your opinion that they were illegally stopped. However, a series of lawyers could determine, actually, we think that this was a legal precursor stop, and so that it was okay. You don't get to subjectively make the call that you feel that the reason you're being pulled over. I'll give you an example.
Well,
I knew
this
a guy.
isn't
let me finish
like
here.
again, you're injecting your own context into this. Supposing Tyre was illegally stopped, why is it okay to violate somebody's rights in every other way when they're illegally stopped, but in a case of rape, it's unique?
Do you think that it's legal to stop people at DUI checkpoints?
Depends. I don't know if about the laws in certain areas. I think
Okay, would you agree that there are a substantial amount of lawyers and other people, which I'm sympathetic to?
Yeah, sure. We're not talking about stopping people at DUI checkpoints.
Right,
I'm talking
but you would
about somebody lying about a traffic stop.
You would agree that there are a litany of people that would say, I feel this is an unjustified stop, correct?
Well, sure, but again, you're injecting your own context into this. I'm saying
It
in a
has nothing to do
situation
with
where
context.
there is an
Your
illegal traffic
advice
stop,
is-
you're
your
injecting your
advice-
own context and avoiding the question. So
I'm not
why is
avoiding the-
rape unique when it comes to illegal stops?
I'm not avoiding the context. I'll leave you finish. What I'm showing is it is clear that the position you're taking is that if you feel that the stop is illegal,
I'm not
then you're
talking about whether
justified-
you feel. I literally gave you the context. If it is an
Ooh.
illegal stop.
Woo! That a little heated. Good stuff, vegan. Must have had some meat today to get that animated, right? No, what you're talking about is people that feel subjectively. You keep talking.
Here we
about
go,
this
injecting your own
omnipotence.
context. I said
You
if
keep
it is an
talking
illegal
omnipotence.
stop.
You keep talking omnipotence.
If it
you
is
absolutely
an
know,
illegal
you don't
stop,
know.
I literally
You don't-
gave you the context, and you keep changing the context. You literally
don't-
can't
you're
answer, can
talking
you?
about-
You
No,
can't
I-
answer, can you?
You
You
wouldn't know
literally
if I can
can't
answer.
answer.
You
He
wouldn't know if I
literally
could
can't
answer.
answer. You
You wouldn't
keep
know-
injecting your own context. I said, if it is an illegal stop, why is rape unique when it's an illegal stop in that context, but in another context when it's an illegal stop, it's not okay to run? Why is rape a unique crime?
Now, I'll start to answer, and then he'll say I can't answer because he'll continually interrupt before I'm able to answer and then claim victory, which is what I would
You
do in
keep
his
avoiding.
position, too.
You keep
See,
dodging. You
there we
keep
go.
dodging.
Which is what I would do in his situation after he's been crushed so poorly in this debate.
All right.
I actually thought you would
Rob,
bring more
let's get to the
Oh,
question. We'll get to the
okay.
question.
So
Let's see
the
if you'll
difference
answer.
is this because the difference is this because even if you could somehow omnipotently know that the officer was outside of his bounds when he pulled you over for something like not having your blinker on or
It's an
something like
illegal
that,
stop.
that is different. That is at least a potential stop that in the realm of things
There we
that they're
go.
allowed to do.
Injecting your own context. Injecting your own context.
Andrew, come
We
on,
know
as
it's
a
an illegal
moderator,
stop.
if you want me to answer the question,
We
tell him to shut his
know
fucking
it's
gob
an
while I
illegal
answer,
stop.
right? Or we could just
We
move
know
on.
it's
I
an
don't give a
illegal
shit.
stop. You keep injecting your own context. Oh, maybe it's not an illegal stop. So you can't answer.
It's cool.
So-
I'm done, Andrew. That's it. If you don't want me to answer, that's fine.
Yeah,
like
you
I'll
can't
just
an-
say,
well,
rape
I
is
want you to
different
answer, but
than
you
pulling
can't
you
because you
over
know what
on
it
an
would lead
illegal
to.
stop. No,
All right.
I just did.
Now,
Rape's
vegan,
different.
hang on. So hang on. There was multiple interjections. I'm going to give Rob time to answer the question. Now, maybe
Well, what's
you
the
don't-
point? He's not
hang
going to
on.
answer. We've already
Maybe
established
he
that.
won't- maybe he won't do so to your standard, but leave him the time to finish the answer. Go ahead, Rob.
Even if a stop's objectively illegal, if it's in the realm of things that police officers do, like pulling people over for traffic violations, that's one thing. Physically raping you is different. It is not remotely in the bounds of jobs that law enforcement can do.
So you're saying to the degree of harm is why rape is unique.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, then you haven't answered the question.
I just did.
No, you didn't.
I just did. If you're not
Making
intelligent enough to
illegal
perceive...
stops is not within the bounds of what the police are supposed to do. So again, you didn't give me an answer. You avoided the answer entirely.
I didn't. I gave you an answer. You're too stupid to understand it. Try some meat in your
No.
diet. It might help.
Yeah, keep dodging.
Okay, we'll move on. We'll move on to the next one. $6 comes in from ESPN8, and then in quotes, the Ocho says, "Vegan Gains, how do you reconcile your stance that rates of unlawful bear stoppages should rise while also giving them the advice that they should run if it was safer than going to bear jail, formerly balls on Trump's head?"
That's a good one.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. So, well, Rob, you don't know about the bear jail, but if you did,
I know
you would
about
think that was
Step
pretty
Brothers. I know about that. But
funny. Yeah. That was pretty good. $10 comes in from Brandy, and she says, I did have a question for Vegan Gains and why he always brings up rape to justify his arguments. But maybe I don't want to know the answer. Anyway, great stream, great debates. The chat is always awesome. There is a lot of rape in your arguments, I must admit, Vegan Gains. Is there a reason for that? Or
Well, there have been
Because that's
cases
more
where
powerful
officers
punishment.
have raped a suspect, and that's another example of an illegal stop for the purpose of just assaulting somebody for their own gratification. I don't see anything unique between an officer stopping a woman to rape them and an officer conducting an illegal stop to get something else out of somebody else. If it's illegal, it's illegal. If he's going to say it's okay to run away in a case of rape, but it's not okay to resist in a case of an unlawful arrest, unless you're just going to argue, unless you have my position that if you believe you're in greater danger by accepting the arrest or whatever, then running away makes sense.
cop pulls you over and says your tags are expired, and it's definitely not. Your tags definitely aren't expired. Your advice is to run. Get in your car and run, correct? Why?
No, it's safer to stay there.
Right. Which is why you shouldn't run. Which is why Tyre Nichols shouldn't have ran.
Well, we don't know. Again, we know the outcome. The guy was murdered, and we saw
We do
how
know he
aggressive
ran,
the
and
cops were
we
at
do
the
kn-
initial stop.
We do know he ran and he died. We do know that.
Yeah, well, we know why he ran as well. We saw the stop.
A stop being illegal is different, right? It's fundamentally what's different about rape. Like, if you're being, and I can't believe it's bad faith that that you're even bringing this up, because every one of us know we don't need source, please, that rape's bad. Source that's different than saying your taillight's broken and pulling you over. Like, everyone knows the difference. But if we're going to engage in this line of questioning, what's fundamentally different is, do you think that on average your chances of escalating the situation with police would be increased, even though you think it was an illegal stop, if you run from them? Yes, on average it will be. If they're literally raping you when you run, that's different.
So,
Wait,
so
is that
you've done
true?
What's that?
It says he ran because he was fucking the wife of the cop who pulled him over.
That's an allegation.
It's an allegation. It's not confirmed yet. It's possible, but it's not confirmed. You've done this in the entire debate where you inject your own context into things and make disanalogies. Getting pulled over because your light's out when it's not is not the same thing what happened to Tyre Nichols.
Why did they pull him over?
It's just...
Why did they pull him over?
Well, we don't know exactly why, but we do know the traffic stop was bogus.
So
They claimed reckless
at the end of the day, your
but we
definitive
know
claims.
it was lie.
Okay, why was it? How do we
They
know it was
claimed
lying?
it was reckless driving. And
Okay, how do we
it
know that was a lie? How do we know that?
Yeah. So the main piece of evidence is that when other officers were on the scene asking about why he was stopped, they couldn't give him a given answer. They just said, "We're trying to get him now because he ran away."
Okay,
they
so
refused
reckless
to give an
driving. What's the
answer.
statute? What's the statute in Memphis of reckless driving? Go ahead.
We know it was a bogus stop.
How do you know that?
Because, again, when officers were attending the scene, other officers, they were asked why he was being arrested and why was he stopped. They refused to give an answer. They just gave weird excuses and diverted and said, well, he ran, that's why we're trying to get him. And then
that might be why they were
asked
trying
directly, why was he stopped? They wouldn't give an answer. They only came up with that excuse after when they made a police report. There's also other contributory evidence. Apparently he was taking photographs, and he was an amateur photographer, and he was just taking photographs of the sunset after work. Like, the chances of him committing reckless driving are pretty unlikely, given the set of circumstances that we know.
So let me tell you a little of what I've interacted with the police. The incident I talked about, I was charged with disorderly conduct. The officer that arrested me charged me with that. The officer inside that told me to fight the charge showed me that in the state of Pennsylvania, the law is written as such that almost any interaction you have that someone could find to be an annoyance is technically considered disorderly conduct. So they could charge you with disorderly conduct if you were arguing with someone about the baseball game and someone overheard it and they thought that that was disorderly or some sort of nuisance. So he basically said, yeah, we had every right to arrest you for disorderly conduct because the law is written in such a way that basically anyone who's living a normal life has broken that law. Now, we have a problem with the way that law is written. That's absolutely true. But you saying that definitively you understand because in the middle of this insane fucking melee that's going on, where these police are acting so egregiously, someone asks, by the way, why did you initially pull him over? And he's like, he ran. That's proof to you that this gentleman could not have engaged in reckless driving. What an asshole you will look like.
They were asked
Let me finish. What an asshole you will look like if dash cam footage comes out that shows him doing something reckless in a vehicle. Well, if something would come out, a surveillance footage or something showing him in a car before the police, what an asshole you'll look like then, right? Because you'll say, oh my God, the initial stop was
released to the
justified.
public.
So you know that every single surveillance camera on the streets where he happened to be driving, all of those tapes have been obtained by police.
All the footage was already collected. They had no police dash cam that was on prior to the stop. They didn't have their body cams on prior to the stop. It was only during the stop. There was no traffic cams that actually showed Tyre Nichols. All the footage is already being released.
Okay,
and if they pulled him over for reckless driving, why wouldn't they have said that when asked?
Okay,
it makes no sense.
Timestamp this, right? Timestamp it. Your statement
I'm sure
is
2 years from now we'll figure out he was in fact reckless driving.
That's not what I'm saying. It's more fundamental than that. You're literally saying all footage has been released to the public. All of it. There is nothing else out there. That's your statement.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so I just want people to know.
There's no other traffic footage.
Okay, I just want people to know. If in the trial you see footage that wasn't currently released to the public, you know Vegan Gaines is a lying asshole. He was justifying people running from the police under these declarative statements. All the evidence is out, all the videos there. I will guarantee there is video that police hadn't captured yet and that hasn't been released to the public. I'll almost guarantee it. But you can see how dangerous an ideology like Vegan Gaines has, where he's suggesting if you feel threatened, run from the police.
The evidence was there and they witnessed this, why didn't they say it? If the evidence was there and they witnessed it, why didn't they say it?
There could be a litany of reasons because they were engaged in beating the shit out of someone and didn't feel the need to respond to someone else. Nonetheless,
so when
I'm
they're
not the one
directly
making
asked why the guy was pulled over and arrested and they refused to answer, that's not an indication to you that there was no legitimate reason for the stop.
No, there could be a litany of reasons. It could be because they didn't have a legitimate reason.
This is gaslighting copium bullshit.
It is not gaslighting copium.
Oh, it could be because they had like memory problems because they hit their head and they forgot how to fucking speak English, right? Maybe it was space aliens affecting their brain, right, Rob? Yeah, when cops refuse to answer a simple fucking question, it's pretty obvious why.
Let him respond. Go ahead.
He can't do it. He can't. You ready? Let me respond. There's a litany of reasons why they wouldn't have responded. Like, for example, if I'm a police officer and I see another police officer arresting someone, and I say, why are you arresting him? And he's winded because he was engaged in an action and said, he ran from me. And I say, what was the initial charge? I told you he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. I knew it.
They weren't
Damn,
winded. You're making shit
vegans.
up. There's literal video footage. Why are you making up excuses for them when that clearly isn't a legitimate excuse?
Ooh, man.
This is bullshit gaslighting. That's not a legitimate excuse. Give me one legitimate possible excuse. Give me one legitimate possible excuse.
All right, now Rob, you got the floor. Vegan, let him finish his answer. Go ahead, Rob.
I have the floor, but I won't. He'll interject. We all understand that, right?
Give me one legitimate possible excuse. You said, oh, he might have been out of breath. He wasn't out of breath. The footage is literally uploaded. Explain to me why the fuck he wouldn't have said why he was arrested. It wasn't because he was out of breath. So tell me why.
Okay, I'll proceed again. He'll interrupt again. This is a fun game. Get your bingo cards out, folks. So, winded is an expression I use. It could also be saying, even if he wasn't winded, is invisibly trying to inhale oxygen in a way that visibly showed that he was struggling breathing. A more important point to it was the adrenaline is so high. They're literally beating the shit out of someone. If you're in a fight, right, and
he
someone
wasn't beating the shit out of somebody.
There we go. There
Another
we go.
lie.
He can
Another lie. You're a bootlicker. You're a fucking bootlicker. You're a fucking bootlicker. You're lying. You're making up bullshit. That's not a legitimate reason. Did you not see the initial footage? Why are you even making up these excuses? You clearly didn't. You clearly didn't. You clearly didn't. One of the officers stayed behind, waited for backup. He wasn't running. He wasn't in a fight, and he was asked why they were trying to track him down and arrest him. He wouldn't respond. He wasn't winded. He wasn't in a fight. His adrenaline wasn't going. So please explain. Give me a legitimate reason for why the cop wouldn't respond to a simple question.
I'm choosing not to talk and leave this fuckhead interrupt me over and over again.
Next question. You're not going to talk because you're making yourself.
I've devastated you in this debate. I've devastated you.
You're lying.
You're giving dangers.
You're literally lying to protect the cops. You are literally lying to protect the cops.
Hang on, we got to move on in the super chats.
I got shit to do with my life than dealing with this fucking moron. Let's go.
I know.
You're lying to protect the cops, and you're calling me a fucking idiot.
I got to ask this one question though, just for me, for my own. Just wondering, because this is the first time I had heard that potentially he sent a picture to somebody, say that he was like boning the wife or something. I hadn't heard that before. Vegan, would you say that there's at least a 25% chance that that's true?
I'm not sure. The original source is questionable, so it was like a tweet made by somebody. So I'm not sure what the chances are, given that the stop was like just really bizarre circumstances. It wouldn't surprise me.
Okay.
If I can, Andrew, if I could respond. The parents of Tyre Nichols have said that's bullshit. They have. So there was an article from Newsweek on January 31st that talked about how they interviewed the parents and everyone said, we don't have any, because I believe the allegation was that he was dating or sleeping with a woman that was the ex-wife of one of the cops. And the parents and everyone connected saying there's no proof of that. We haven't seen that. However, the following day, the police officers, the investigators in a press conference did say it's something we're looking into, but we haven't seen any proof of that yet. So it's not that it could be, it absolutely could be, but I haven't seen anything that suggests that there's proof of that. And the people that are publicly speaking that knew Tyre are saying that it's not true. Doesn't mean that it's not, but you know.
All right. $9.99 comes in from Adam Nice. Thank you for that. Says nothing. $10 from Wilhelm Bones. Says absolutely nothing. $10 more from Wilhelm Bones. Says absolutely nothing. Love that. Retard for Canadian funny money, $2.79 worth of it, which is about 30 cents US, I think. Is Rob an Aussie? I'm pretty sure it's pronounced no. No, I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know. I have no idea. Australia's not even a real country.
If I had my druthers, I would live in Walkabout Creek circa 1980 with Donk and Crocodile Dundee, but not
like I said, Australia is not even a real country. So what do you want? Okay, Randy West for $1. Thank you. Says absolutely nothing. Hillary Clinton for $5.99. I don't know. Is that pounds or is that what is that? The UK money.
Euro?
Is it? Yeah. Is it euros or is these pounds? I think they have the same emblem. I'm not sure.
No, pound is different. It looks more like an ampersand. That's a euro.
Okay. It says, don't let me down, Vegan Gains. I'd hate for all that funding to go to waste. From Hillary Clinton herself, Vegan.
I'm probably on a list now. Shit.
Yeah, Ziggy21 for $2 says, debate Bart K on veganism, cholesterol. I don't know who Bart K is.
He's a crazy wacko who doxes people who annoy him, so I'm not going to debate him.
Yeah, well, that's no bueno. There's no doxing and never harassment. So our communities, we won't allow them to harass other people too. They might give you some shit while you're here, but they're not going to come over to your chat and fuck with you. Never. Peter Parker for $5 says, can you please set up a third debate between Zen and Gaines? We need a third one to complete the trilogy. The first two debates were so good. They were really good debates. And I'm sure that me and Vegan Gaines will talk in the future and we'll discuss future debates with different people that I'm sure will be a lot of fun. robnoerr, Vegan Gains, thank you guys so much for coming out this fine evening. It was a ton of fun, whether you think so or not. I mean, everybody had a good time. Vegan Gains, take a minute, shout out your channel, and, of course, the OnlyFans, if you'd like.
Yeah, find me on YouTube. Vegan Gains is my channel handle. I'm on Instagram at vegangains.real and OnlyFans, of course. I'm Vegan Gains on OnlyFans.
Okay, and then robnoerr, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm robnoerr. You can find me on comfy.stream. I'm on Rumble at Normal America, YouTube also at Normal America, and Twitch at robnoerr. Stream usually around 9 o'clock, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I'll be doing Drunken Debates, which Andrew's always welcome to come back on as a guest. I'll be moderating that tomorrow at 8:30 exclusively on my Rumble channel. So thanks so much for having me. Thanks to you as well, Vegan Gains. Disagreements, I think what you're saying is a little dangerous there. But honestly, I enjoyed the interaction. I'm happy to be here. So.
All right, and I appreciate it very much, gentlemen. And then Rob, if you want, we have a tradition to uphold, right? So from all of us here at the Crucible to all of you out there in Crucible land, have a wonderful night.
Shit, I forgot to shout out my OnlyFans. Damn. I keep making that mistake. It's fun.
I couldn't help but ask the 25% question. I had to. Okay, I had to. It was the one biased thing I did, but it just like was in my brain. The second he said that, I'm like, I gotta ask it. I've gotta ask it.
Well, here's the thing, and this isn't really. I'm not talking shit on Vegan Gains. I'm not rehashing the debate, but the idea of very likely. This is something in policy debate that happened all the time, right? Almost all topics for policy debate would be something like this. Resolved, the United States should substantially increase its funding of revolutionaries across one of the 4 following countries, right? And then a team would stand up and be like, our plan's to send $10,000 to the Mujahideen. And you're like, well, that's not substantial, right? And so there's a debate on what those terms mean. But when I hear the term very likely, that means better than not, right? That's, not really talking about the debate in general, but to me it was like,
expecting the 25% on that, I must admit. Like the one thing I'll say is I was listening was like when you say likely, 25% isn't what goes to mind. But I did think he had a good point when he said he made the Russian roulette analogy. The one bullet in the revolver. Suddenly, when you look at the chances, then they seem really high. That seems like it does seem like an increased likelihood drastically when the stakes are that high, though, right?
Well, yeah, I still wouldn't say that's very likely, but I would say that that's more substantial, right? In that because the effects of it. But yeah, I mean, whatever.
So how you been, Rob? How's life treating you?
Good. I'm doing some setup stuff here. You can see I don't have the flag behind me anymore. I'm a dirty commie. Now, I got some friends making me some sort of stuff to go in the background there. So I got a new table. I'm getting a new computer. And life's good. My son, Hank's doing very well. And my wife...
busted his leg, right?
Yeah, he was a trooper, though. He had a cast on for 4 weeks, and then it was off, and you can't tell that it was ever on. And I'm like, being a first-time dad, I'm such a baby. I'm like, what are the long-term effects? They're like, shit. They're like, 2 weeks, you'll forget 2 weeks after he gets that cast off that it ever happened. He'll be running around. And he doesn't favor it or anything, so he's crazy. It's actually, so the way I work, I do block shifts. It's actually, I'm such a baby. It's getting to me for the first time because he's old enough to not understand why I'm not home. So he'll FaceTime me and he's like, Dad, book? And like, I'll read the book over the phone for him. And then I'll be like, well, I got to go. Like at the end of it, I got to go. I could go back to work. And he's like, Dad? And I was like, a year from now, he'll understand like, oh, Dad's at work. He comes home on Wednesday. But right now it's just like, why are you leaving? And I'm like, I don't really have a good answer. Because money and food. Yeah,
He's just not there
it's going
yet.
good. Yep, it's going good.
Well, yeah. Well, that's great, man. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear that you're doing well. So I don't know that we've been growing like a weed over on this end, and we're probably going to keep on doing that for the substantial future anyway. You know what I mean? And
but I wanted
so
to ask
pretty
you.
Happy about it.
Yeah, you're doing great, and I think that it's very funny, like looking at sort of the unique place that you're at, like ideologically or culturally, right? and how there's such a division between you and the Groypers. But if you were watching, like as an audience, you might be like, well, the trad life and like all this stuff. I don't know which side I want to go. What do you think about like Fuentes coming out being like, Biden State of the Union based and fuck Tucker Carlson and like it's like he's literally going down.
So I put some of those tweets out, kind of expressing like, listen. I know it, and it's not. Again, my message isn't. It's not a sexy message. That's the problem, right? So instead, I focused most of my adult life on making sure that I had a really coherent and grounded worldview, and that I understand how operations work. How does the world work? How does it function? Who functions with it? Why do these things work this way? And what ends up happening, of course, is that it gets drowned out by the screeching. And it's a here today, gone tomorrow. And same thing with Richard Spencer, here today, gone tomorrow. Nick Fuentes, here today, gone tomorrow, this type of thing. Because their messaging is always the same. It's Jews and race, and that's all they care about. And they don't care what they need to endorse to keep that message going, because they believe that that's where their bread is buttered, and that's what the main primary fight is about, is race in the country of the United States and Jews, which it is framed in any number of different directions. Sometimes that's framed as there was Jewish communist exploitation after Operation Paperclip, and then later on during the Cold War, and some of that's true. But it's also framed in a way, if we just want to question Jewish power or things, but it's always the same shit. It's always a hyper focus on an external group, saying if this group is in some way removed or dealt with or blah, 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 everything will go back to how it was in Grandpappy's day. And it's not true. Not only is none of it true, but even if it were true, it still wouldn't address the fundamental question, which is what type of society are we going to live in, where people have this type of moral base from which to draw from in order to live within this society. And even you, for instance, you're not a Christian, but you draw from Christian ethics. Many people draw from Christian ethics, still understanding these are the best ethical principles for the society, even if they're just adjacent to them. And the problem with Groypers and these types of people is, instead of leaning towards moving society towards a good system that's grounded, it's moving them towards attacking external groups, saying that once they're dealt with, then everything will just be perfect.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And it's also like, it's the popularity. Again, we would both admit this, and there has to be some sort of truth in the underlying foundation for a movement like that to begin. And so, like, you see in this debate, like, I agree when white nationalists talk about sort of attacks from our institutions, white people, sure, that exists, right? The question is, what do we do about it? What's their solutions? That's the problems we have. But with them, they just don't have a strong foundation. So I think a lot of the popularity that's built by people like that is sort of these perpetual controversy outrage machine, right? That they're, like you've said before, they're going to edgelord everyone. And you're not going to edgelord people that are, chopping their dicks off. It's just not going to happen. And they fall apart once they exist for, they reach this critical mass where it falls apart.
Well, and try to understand that I think that the premise and some of what you're saying there might be slightly faulty, only in this sense, because you're right about everything you just said, but I don't think that they're built. In other words, I don't think that their messaging itself and then their outreach via their messaging is popular at all. What I think ends up happening is that the progressives actually build these people up so that they can tear them down. They need to have an enemy from which to point to. And you'll hear this all the time. This is Groyper, and before that, Richard Spencer's style messaging, and here's how it went. It went, and it still goes to this day, look at his enemies. He's the most deplatformed man in America. You can judge this person by everybody who hates him, right? So he must be telling the truth. This is an old shtick, right? But in truth, what's really building him up is those people who hate him so much, mostly in the progressive media, and they put a huge limelight on him, and they absolutely adore that. And Spencer was a master at playing that too. It builds him up, and then they tear it all down. And they say, look at our victory. Look at our great progressive victory. They built it up, and then they tear it right back down. Like, these guys can't wait to have a Kanye West campaign to point at and say, look at the radicalizing agents of the right wing who are co-opting this poor mentally ill fool and putting him up front and center so that he can Jewsburg. And it gives the rallying cry. And even a lot of what you would call Wignats or these ethno-nationalists have understood that this is a significant problem on that side. And they go, and that's why they always say things like PSYOP, or it's being co-opted, or this isn't what we really want, or this isn't what we're really asking for. Every single time it seems to get sidelined into bizarro land, right? Where now suddenly you're pushing Kanye West and Biden on here, right? Well, seemingly, though, the media seems to adore this. And so that person gets a lot of attention for it, don't they? Media says, oh, shit, we can hyper-focus on Kanye West doing all this Jewsburging. And in some ways, it actually builds up in people's brains the reaction solution of this whole JQ dynamic to begin with. It's from my perspective, it seems like it's the easiest thing on planet Earth to avoid. And people run headlong into the trap every single time. It's like if somebody dropped a hand grenade on the ground and it says on the hand grenade, pick me up. So people walk by and go, okay.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? That's what
That's a great it's really just I don't know. I mean, for me, I'm so out of the loop of those people anyways, and to me it just seems like the vast bulk of their audience are just edgy teenagers or young people that life's kind of fucked over in various ways, which I actually sympathize, as I've told you before. Not the 35-year-olds that Nick once touched on the shoulder and it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to him in his life. Fuck that guy. But, the younger people, I feel bad. But it's just like, I feel bad just watching them get suckered in by this shit, and it's like, it just... I don't know. It's just laughable to then watch the the people that are still desperately trying. No, wait. When Nick's defending Biden, like, actually he has some good points. And then you get to see the lefties, like the Dylan Burns of the world, like, see, even Nick Fuentes acknowledges that Biden's speech was okay. And you're just like, what a fucking joke this whole thing is. It's like,
and that's what it is. It's it makes a complete mockery out of an actual conservative Christian message that could be pushed, and it's all there to feed a singular ego, and the media plays on that. They build these effigies up and then they tear them down, but don't think that this doesn't bleed over into national politics. It does, just in an unorthodox way people don't really recognize. If you look at Donald Trump, I can give you the exact moment the justification for the left's blitzkrieg against him was Charlottesville, when he came out and said there's good people on both sides. Well, who was on the other side? Fuentes and Spencer and this, you know what I mean? And the whole gang was all there, right? So he says there's good people on that side too. Suddenly the media from then on referenced Charlottesville over and over and over again, and the tiki torches over and over and over again to point at this disaster and say, look, Trump's dog whistling, he's doing all these different things. It was a fucking huge disaster for the Trump campaign, Trump administration. Just the fact that he even said those words, and he didn't, he has no fundamental underlying understanding of what those groups are. So, he's just speaking out of turn, but it's used against him forevermore. And so thing is like, this used to be a movement that was based around peak optics and things like that. And it has become kind of this Joker fest, and the effigy is getting built up and it's going to get torn right back down. They come out of obscurity for a minute and then they get torn right back down, come out of obscurity for a minute, get torn right back down. But the message is never going to take. And as the younger base audience anyway gets older, their priorities change and they fucking leave, because they're like, well, there's nothing here for me. I have a wife. Why are you bashing women? I have this. I have children. Right. Like, what are your policy prescriptions here? We can't even do policy prescriptions unless we Jewsburg for another 5 years. And it's like, well, that doesn't do us any good, right?
Yeah, it's just not. I just thought it was funny. I saw you tweeting that out, and I was like, I don't know that anyone's been as prescient on that movement as you. And so I just imagine you sometimes when you see the next fucking joke that they're doing come out, that you're just like, look at this. Now we got Fuentes. Oh, Biden's State of the Union. Kind of based. It's just like, wow.
Well, what's funny as a segue there is that I never had any intention of fighting with them at all or having anything to do with them. My whole policy was just, stay away from them. Let them do whatever. I don't care what they do. They're not of consequence to me or my messaging. But once they, moved into the threats and we're going to kill you, rape your wife, and then tried the multiple political assassinations with the swattings, that point it's like, well, what do? You know what I mean?
Right.
They're basically saying, if you counter signal us to any degree, we'll do whatever is necessary to end you. Even if that is a permanent ending. In fact, even from the things that they've done. So it's like, look. There's never even a reason for the fight to begin with. It's just gone their way and I go mine, but they don't. Some groups don't operate that way. If you're not in the cult, this means you're directly opposed to the cult and therefore must be dealt with. There is no neutrality. There are no bystanders. You're not even allowed to have an alternative message or you're a threat, right? That's the way it works.
Yeah. And I do think that there's a lot of truth that they are, if not created, propped up by people on the left. Like, when I want to do debates with bigger left-wing streamers, a lot of them don't want to deal with it, and there's for a litany of reasons. Part of it's because I don't have a huge audience, and they know that I'm pretty good, so they don't want to risk looking bad when there's not much gain for them to have. But they'll debate someone that's a small audience. Fuentes is a big audience, obviously, but they'll debate someone that's a small audience, even if they're good debaters, as long as there are certain things they could do, right? And if they could say, well, you're racist, right? That's all like a left-winger needs to be able to do. Like, it doesn't matter if they're getting their ass handed to them in a specific part of the debate. They'll just be like, but aren't you a white nationalist? Don't you think the Holocaust is fake? And that's it. That's the get out of jail free card, right? So you'll debate Nick Fuentes even if he's not big. You'll debate a Groyper because you're able to have that trump card when you can just be like, but at the end of the day, you're just a racist. And I think that it tangentially screw over people with an actual message that want to get into the arena and like, I'll debate you on conservatism. I'll debate you on populism. Well, they don't want that. Because there's not this easy out. It's like, well, what do I get? I don't get anything.
Well, and the continuous attempt will always be an ongoing campaign of character assassinations, which they themselves exempt on their own end. So, say, for instance, that somebody's a drug addict. They'll say, you can't support a drug addict. Meanwhile, over on their channel, one of their primary supporters gets so drunk and makes a 45-minute video death threat while he's huffing glue and shit like crazy. This, right? It's like, but these are never-ending hypocrisies which exist, which are given a pass on by the indoctrinated base. But pulling those people out of that is very difficult because from their perspective, they're young kids and they just want to watch the world burn because it's funny, right? They don't realize that there might be long-term ramifications. They don't have anything to stand in front of. They don't have a family. They don't have wives. None of the Groypers have wives, or if they did, they all left them. Or if they haven't left them yet, they're going to. Or they have no children. They have no stake in the game at all. So it's a perpetual, ongoing motion of just let's watch the world burn. And it's like, well, but I have to live in that world you want to burn, asshole. So maybe if you're going to burn it down, you mind telling me what you're going to replace it with? That's where things get a little bit sus with these people, right? Everything they say you can make it sound good,
right? Until
you ask them, well, where do we go after we've burned down this decrepit, roach-filled, horrific house that we're all living in? Are we going to be out in the rain, right? Or are we going to try to fix that? Like, which thing do we want to do here? Do you have a plan? They never do. There's just a waste of time.
It definitely is, but yeah, I had fun tonight. I tried this again, not relitigating the debate, but I do become conscious of trying to spice it up a little for content if it seems like that it's too mellow. So I hope I didn't get out of line with trying to poke the bear a little.
I mean, the thing is I know when people are trying to fight just for the purpose of fighting, which I don't like that. Right. And when there's they actually really want to go at each other, but there's too many restraints. And so there's a line that you fall in there where you're like, look, obviously these guys have been chomping at the bit to go at each other for the last 30 minutes, and they have been holding themselves back from that, right? But if you loosen the reins a little bit, let's see what happens. That's not manufacturing problems. That's just finally allowing them to get at each other the way that they wanted to the entire time. And I think that that's fine. I think the problem comes in if you're like, make this entertaining, bro. You know, and that's bullshit. And by the way, it's not even productive, right? But what is productive is to be like, look, I know you got some shit to say and you've been holding it back this whole time. So just fucking say it. And like, you know what I mean? Let's figure out what it is. Let the real you come out instead of your representative. And that I do think has lots of value and it's entertaining at the same time.
Yeah, and it's a fine line, right? Because you never know. I try to always be reciprocating, right? Like, so I try not to be, really getting, unless it's someone that I know, right? Like, let's say that it's me and you. Like, I might in an opening statement be like, this fuckhead, blah, 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 you know, but that's different. Yeah. Because we know each other. But, like, I've never met, like, if I've never met someone like Vegan Gains, I'm not just going to come out of the gate and be like, yo, this guy kissed my ass. You know, but if I feel that...
Told him the same thing. Rob will match your energy.
Right.
And I think that's... But the second you're a shithead, just know, right? It's going to match you across the board, so...
Yeah, that's it was. I enjoyed it. Or it would be interesting to debate him on a different topic. It became like... You know, it's one of those things where you get 30 minutes into a debate and you're like, I don't even know what we're talking about. The topic's Tyre Nichols, which is so broad. We got to kind of find some area here. And, you know, I thought that it was going to be big on the systemic
I knew that
race.
this debate would be the debate's a catalyst to lead into tangentials that are actually the problem between the two people. But first it takes discussing the case of what's going on and what his worldview is on the case for you to get to why he believes tangentially in these things that he's then applying to the case.
Right.
That's where the real meat of the argument is. That might take 45 minutes.
Yeah. And
I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that. And I think it's necessary to do just to get into the actual meat and the crux of why it is we're taking this stance or not. And, you know, a good debater can draw that out or they can't, but it's totally and completely up to them. You know, one of the things about the Crucible is we're always allowing people to go after worldviews and not start from a presupposition of this must be your worldview or you're not allowed to debate. That's bullshit.
Well, and another thing that you said there, like, and I know I've moderated a couple debates now, but, you know, one of the first debates that me and you actually set up, probably the first one that was actually topic was chosen and it was me versus you in a debate was reparations. Remember? Yeah. And that debate was about reparations for like 10% of it, right? And that's okay, right? If the conversation goes somewhere that's more interesting, I'm perfectly fine with that. Even if it's like, as long as there's a thread from the initial topic.
Yeah,
like,
right. Well, it's a necessity. It's actually a necessity. So what other people might consider tangential to the topic often are actually the moral prisms and the belief structures, which are the driving force behind what their opinion on the topic is. Those are always necessary to get into, or otherwise you're not actually debating anything. You're just like, here's my opinion. Well, here's mine. Well, I disagree. And it's like, no, there's a whole lot going on behind that view that needs to be gotten after. So I think that is important. And that's what, you know, sometimes people will say things like they're getting off in the weeds and I'll say, well, give it a second. Let's see if it ties back in. And often it does. You have to understand where a person's thought process is though. So that's the difference between low tier, high tier, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, you know, that's what I think that, like, not to toot my own horn, but one of the things that I'm very good at is, and I think you're very good at this too, we have two things. One is that we have a worldview that allows us to comment on a breadth of issues, right? We don't need Tucker Carlson to tell us what to say. If we hear a story breaking as we're talking, we'll say, well, this is what I think about that based on the knowledge that I have. And the other thing is we both understand for the content or for the purpose of having an interaction that's a debate, that you have to find sort of fertile ground to have some sort of disagreement. It's not really productive if the whole time we're just like, yep, I agree. Yeah. So we're able, because of those two things, you're able to be like, even if you give me a topic that seems like, well, I'm just going to agree with them, I'll bet we could find an area to disagree. And that might seem like you have to take a weird winding thread to get there.
But that
principle,
true, really.
And I think that's, I like that, and I like interacting with people that could do that. Like and even like when Aftershock's setting up people for drunken debates, those like a panelist like you is going to be the best panelist because you never have to worry. Well, shit, what if we get 6 people that all agree with the topic? I will guarantee you will find something in that topic to be like, no, I don't agree with everything on everyone on this. I'll find
and just because you and I can agree that that's tissue paper doesn't mean that we agree that the CEO who made the tissue paper should be impoverished and thrown out in the street because he's too rich, right?
Right.
So the agreement on the substance, sometimes the topic itself is actually what the tangential is, right? That's actually what the side portion of this whole thing is the topic itself rather than the entire worldview at once. And so it's kind of teasing that out and then diving into that full lore. That, and there's, by the way, there's reasons for that too. Another good reason to do that is it does build suspense, right? That whole debate even tonight was a build up to, no, you son of a bitch, it's not true, right? And it's like, but it took getting there from, well, no, wait a second, what about the data? What about this? What about that? And then as you started to move into it, you realize, oh, fuck, you have an entire leftist view. He's like, oh, fuck, this guy's a total right-tard, right? And then it's game on. But it takes teasing that out. And I think all of that's good stuff. And those are conversations that need to be had all the time. And yes, there needs to be an entertainment factor with debates, but it should just never be forced.
Right.
You know?
I totally agree. I'll say I'll be heading out here soon, but
yeah.
I know you don't have to comment on this if you don't want, because it was someone that was on your debate last night. But I do find it hilarious that the last time Vaush was on the Crucible and someone put a super chat in, was like, will you debate robnoerr? He said, who? And this time when I came into the chat, when my face came up on the screen, his first words were, oh shit. It's weird. It's almost like he knew me, even when he was pretending he didn't.
I will say this. So I have never had a policy of screening away callers or super chats if they have legitimate questions or criticisms for debaters, regardless of their size. I will, and sometimes read a super chat in a different way if there's maybe a violation of TOS or they're so over the top, like, this guy's an N, or something stupid like that. I'm not going to read that shit. But for the most part, I don't want the debaters to be able to dodge the super chat question. And I don't want them to be able to dodge callers, like, say, have a safe space. So I've always had the policy, if you call in, you got something to say, you're going to get heard, And so I knew that the atmosphere could have been one where they're like, oh, it's a setup, right? That whole, switching chairs with somebody else, it's a setup type of thing.
Yeah.
And I just don't do that either. But it's like, he has a legitimate call. He wants to say his piece. He deserves to say his piece, so I let you call in. I don't think there's a problem with that.
No, and if that debate tonight, if Vaush called in, right, like I wouldn't be like, oh shit, was this a setup? And here's the thing: I, as a caller, I threw a little jab there at the end, but I wouldn't call in if it's just like, oh, you fucking ducking me? Is that what's going on? Like, I actually had a question.
It was a very respectful call. It was a respectful call.
And here's the thing, right? And I don't know, and I think you would probably feel the same way as me. I don't like Vaush's politics at all. I don't like the way he debates. I think he's very bad faith and disingenuous. But I'm not like sitting up at night like, I hate this guy. I don't really hate him.
No.
I really don't. And I don't wish him ill at all. I really don't. And so it's not like that, I'm on some agenda where it's like, I'm like these fucking people that, like, I see it all the time with content creators that have these, you see it on the right with the Groypers and shit. I see it on the left with these like blood feuds that people, I'm going to ruin this guy. Oh, it turns out I saw that President Saturday was putting shit out about Erudite today. It's like,
President
what the fuck
Sunday.
is... Or whatever. I don't get these people that have these blood feuds. For me, it's just like, I legitimately want to talk to Vaush, not because, I have a grudge. It's because I think it would be a good debate. I think he's a bigger streamer. And I think that he is a tier of debater that is more impressive than I usually get to debate. And like, if you play football, you want to play the best, right? That's how I feel.
Try to understand that most of the supposed blood feuds aren't actual blood feuds or people upset. They come from orbiting. So they're a secondary feud that then becomes a blood feud. Right. So what happens in this particular feud is President Sunday is not a big fan of the DGG community, and they hate his guts. And President Sunday, of course, deals with Mr. Girl. Mr. Girl hates DGG. So there's all these orbiters around Destiny, and Not So Erudite's a DGG orbiter. So of course she's going to defend Destiny. Blah 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 blah. So these feuds are actually secondary because they all get their clout and their moxie from orbiting this large creator. That's why I always had the policy: the Crucible never orbit. So you'd be like, oh, you'd have 150,000 subscriber channel by now if you just orbit. And it's like, fuck you. I built the whole thing out of nothing, right? Has some of the best debates on the web, period. And also has a huge live audience. It just gets bigger and bigger.
Yep.
It also has a large foundation of viewers who will watch every single debate. We can grow externally without orbiting and selling the fuck out, in other words. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I'm
you've done
with
the
you.
same thing.
Yeah.
You've done the same thing. So that's what I'm saying is like, understand though, that these supposed feuds for the most part never would happen if they didn't feel like I have to take this position against this person because otherwise my meal ticket, which is this large planet that my gravity is orbiting around, is going to turn on me. And I think Mr. Girl found that out, right? And many people have found that out who deal with this. It's like much better to create the orbit for people to come around than it is for you to orbit people.
Yeah, and I don't have it in, and you're right. Like I could sit here every day and put content day after day. Vaush is running for me. Destiny's running for me. Maybe I don't feel like I believe in my heart of hearts. They know that it'll be a challenging time and they don't have much to gain for it. But I really don't give a shit either. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe they don't fucking feel like it. Good enough for me. I don't have hard feelings. It's just like, okay, I made myself available. I reached out. I have my belief, and I'll be honest that my belief is that they're basically ducking me. But that's it. I'm not going to, I know I could get more viewers if I goad them into interacting with me. I'll start drama with them and shit. Like, no, I wish them no ill will whatsoever. It's like, okay, fair enough. You have other shit going on.
What's funny and interesting about it, the way that I kind of learned this lesson is in this kind of back and forth with the grapes. When I talk to them, when I can actually like get one on the line and actually have a discussion with them or something like this, I always end up in this position, which is it doesn't even sound like you have an actual problem with me or any of the things that I say. And you seem to agree with like 99% of them. I get that there's a 1 percentile there, you don't, but who cares about that, right? What's the actual problem? Well, the problem is that I'm supposed to hate you because I'm in this orbit. Same thing with the sub creators, which would be the Cozy TV fans. Same thing. What is their actual problem with me? I've never dealt with most of them, right? It's that they're supposed to hate me because the big planet they're orbiting says hate him. And this is the same thing with DGG and VGG, all these different communities. It's always a sublet of the hatred of the person actually comes not even from themselves. It's just like a top-down kind of ordering of an arrangement of things. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, you know what? It's also fucking disingenuous. And it's all so fucking manufactured, and it's all such bullshit.
It's so many people that aren't able, through their own ideology or their own entertainment value, to take themselves to where they want to be content-wise. So they know that there's this shortcut. I just start some shit with someone bigger than me. I start some shit with a community, and that's guaranteed. Like, that's the lifeblood of this shit, right? And like, especially the lefties. I get it with the gropers, but with the lefties, like, take a place like Twitch. They're a dime a dozen. How do you stand out, right? Like, okay, when you had Destiny on there, you had him. Regardless of what anyone watching thinks of Destiny, he was bringing content that thousands of people were watching live at a time. That's an impressive achievement. That he's doing things that I can't do, right? I think I crush him in debates, but that's a different skill set, right? He's bringing content that people like. So how do you, and then you have a tier below that, right? But what do you do if you're one of these lefties that's like, you know, you got 12 people watching? Well, if you could get on, you know, some drama with DGG, all of a sudden, eyeballs, right? And like, you know, to me, it's just always like, you know, it's indicative of people that don't have better shit to do. I have a kid. I don't got time to sit here and act like I'm in these fucking few. Like, for me, it's like, I enjoy doing this. That's it.
Yeah, but again, the thing is that the reason that these things happen, and literally, rapers call this K-fab. They do this all the time where they manufacture drama for the purpose of bringing in viewers and eyeballs, and they don't even mean it. A lot of times they say, oh, I was just fun and it's just satire. I didn't even mean that shit. Don't even take it seriously. I'm just talking shit about you because it brought in some eyeballs and views. And the next one's like, okay, man, no problem. And I think to myself, how do you ever trust people? How do you ever trust people who manufacture it all the time? You don't know where it's crying wolf, right?
Yep.
Eventually you're gonna say wolf, wolf, and people are gonna be like, that's fucking kayfabe, right? Well, no, it's really a fucking wolf this time. Well, too bad. You know what I mean? Nobody really understood your intentions. You irony broed yourself out of having any kind of actual stake or say because your word means nothing. So this is my take on it. So
totally agree. Well, hey, thank you so much for having me on. Like, there is no doubt the Crucible is the best debate platform online, and I'm always up for any debates. A debate like that's something. God damn, I tried to goad Joe Lewis on Drunken Debates the other day into this conversation of redlining. All those people, that's all I heard for 2 years. Anytime I talk systemic racism, redlining in the 60s. It's like, dude, the biggest mortgage lender just came out and said we're not lending to white people, and they don't have shit all to say about it. They don't have anything to say now.
And let me tell you this one thing real quick, too, before I go, just real quick. People might think that we avoid using you because you used to come on quite a bit. Like, you guys ducking Rob, or why isn't Rob on as much as he used to be? A lot of people won't debate with Rob. Yeah. Okay, so it's not that the query doesn't go out. There's many times I've DM'd Rob and been like, hey, I'd like to set up a debate on this. What do you think? And I already know the answer is fucking yes, right? But I ask anyway, and he's like, with who? And I tell him, and I'll go approach this person. They don't want to do it, right? They don't want to do the debate. So it's not that we're like anti-Noor because his political status is more libertarian and ours is much more, right Christian leaning. It's just that there's a lot of fucking people who won't take him on. And so it's always nice. We found more and more now who are much higher tier who are willing to take him on. But it's like, that's a tough road. You can be so skilled at this that you skill yourself out of the market.
Right.
Right?
And let me also give another reason to detriment to me. Like, a lot of the topics and people that are really gung-ho that, are having these interesting debates on your platform are like theology discussions. And I'll be honest, I don't have much to add in that, So if I come on and debate Jay Dwyer, who I think is brilliant at what he talks about, where is my sort of, I could argue with him. I could give my honest opinion, but it's, you know what I mean? It's a different style or not style, I guess it's the substance of the particular topics. Sometimes certain people just don't fit. Now, I could talk about anything I can, but, if you get someone who's a huge Protestant that's debating someone that's a huge Orthodox person, that's probably a better fit than it's like, well, Rob's sort of milquetoast. I kind of follow what I want out of Christianity.
We definitely don't limit ourselves on topics, but
right.
The reason you see a lot of religious debates happening on the Crucible is what's really relevant in the nation is a decline of Christianity and a decline of Christian morality. And so those people feel like they're ostracized and attacked and have no platform from which to speak, even for their own theological issues with each other. And it is one of the most pressing things on planet Earth from that side. And they just are allowed to have a platform, so they flood to it. That's why you see a lot of religious debates. We don't shy away from that, knowing that that is the most contentious topic on planet Earth. And I'm happy.
Not only that, where else do you see it, right? Like you could find 15 platforms that are having systemic racism debates. But you show me the platform that's having the Protestant versus Orthodox debate. It doesn't exist. And I think there are people out there that are passionate about their religion that look to the Crucible and they're like, oh, I want to get in there. I've been chomping at the bit to have this sort of discussion, and there's nowhere and I think that it's amazing. I enjoyed listening to those debates, even if I don't agree with either party involved, because to me, it's like you could see the enthusiasm for the audience and for the people debating where it's like, shit, this is a conversation. Where is it happening in the academic world? Where is it even happening in the religious world? Nowhere. Literally nowhere do you see those debates. So I
no. And so I agree. Well, I'll let you go, Rob. You have a wonderful night. Thanks for sticking around. We can't break with tradition, right? So
yeah. And tell the family I said hi too. So
will do, brother. Have a good night.
All right, take it easy, man. I'll stick with you all just for a moment here. Just give me a second, but I do want to be done here. I wanted to be done by midnight. The wife will be mad. But, you know, I don't know what to say. First off, my chat is ridiculously behind. So I apologize for that. But what I can see on the left is like from way up in the debate. So I thought you guys were like yelling about Andrew. I'm like, I think everything he's saying is pretty reasonable. But yeah, you know, I don't know what to say. I wasn't that impressed with Vegan Gains, you know, which is one thing. Telling people to run from the police is something completely different. I think that's dangerous. And that's sort of the entire thing that I'm criticizing with all these conversations about systemic racism, that you're setting up you know what? 1 second. You're setting up a situation. There we go. That's better. You're setting up a situation where Gypsy Crusader was released good. You're setting up a situation where I think that you're making these sort of things more likely. And I know that there was criticism at the end where people were saying in the chat that I was defending police officers. I'm not. I can't be more clear. The actions I saw from those police officers were horrible. They deserve a fair day in court, but I think this is even more inexcusable than the Derek Chauvin stuff. I do. And I think the standard should be higher for police, and that I would be for sentence modifiers for people that so go beyond the scope of what's legitimate as a police officer. You know? I just, that's how I feel. Oh, what's up, Timothy? How you doing, man? Key lime. He wasn't debating. Big Berg. I know, man. How's it going? What's up, CBK? Sorry, the chat's way behind. The last chat I have is Aftershock saying "do too," and then Fun One says the squad, Jeffries, and so on. So that's probably like an hour and a half ago. So I don't know what's going on with my chat there on the right. But I mean, I just don't like, he kept going back to this rape analogy. It's a completely different thing. And the problem is he keeps wanting to say like, well, we know that this was an illegal traffic stop, so he was justified in running away. Now, listen, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this case. I think that it's a red herring. I think that there, as I said in my opening, there will always be terrible police officers with millions of police officers and hundreds of millions of people and billions of interactions between law enforcement and people and everyone having a recording device. There's always going to be footage of shitty cops. There's going to be footage of heroic cops. There's going to be footage of lazy cops, whatever. And it's clear that an agenda is being pushed that every time the story goes one direction, that we have to stop our nation and the people in charge want to talk about systemic racism. Hell, Joe Biden was just talking about it again at the State of the Union, where he was like, oh, black Americans have to have the talk. And, the idea that Vegan Gains was saying, well, we need to talk about this because no one does. That's all we ever talk about. It's absurd. And you could see just how little there was. I mean, his best evidence was this black cop used the N-word. I mean, come on. But, when he keeps talking about like, well, wouldn't you run if a cop was raping you? Right, because that's outside the scope of anything not only appropriate humanely, like as a human, but certainly out of the duties of a law enforcement officer. A law enforcement officer doing what legitimately they're allowed to do, pull you over, handcuff you, detain you, right? That, you might say you did that for illegitimate reasons. You didn't have the right in this particular case. But that's when you should have your day in court and fight in court. What you shouldn't do is run and escalate that situation. That doesn't mean that the officers aren't accountable for the actions that they took. They still are. I'm not defending them. But I think he was just out of his depth. Tyree was his parents were at the State of the Union. I did not. I kind of half-assed watched the State of the Union, I'll be honest. But, and I just thought, I don't know what else to say. As far as, if I had to analyze the debate, I was surprised at how little substance he had. I thought that he would have something that I was unaware of that suggested this might be of a racial nature, or focus more on the idea of systemic racism causing the actions of these police officers. But he didn't really have much on that. But it is what it is. I didn't think that he was very effective at presenting his case. But once he started advocating for things that I thought could actually cause real world harm, telling people to run from the police, I think that that's a huge, incredible mistake that should be called out. And I hope that my positive performance earlier in the debate, if anyone was watching and was thinking, maybe I'll listen to Vegan Gains, I hope that they changed their mind. No, I agree, Key Lime. It doesn't excuse the police officer's actions. Even if you're just looking at it from a pure self-perseverance, your chances on average are going to be incredibly higher of having a worse interaction with the police if you're fleeing them. It's just true. So even if you're like, fuck cops, I don't care about them at all, just from the point of view of the person being pulled over, your chances are better of not having a terrible interactions. It just, I don't know. But, and then, he kind of got unhinged towards the end there, which I'll be honest, I was upping the intensity a little too. But the constant, oh, you can't answer for this. Right, I can answer quite easily, right? There is a litany of reasons that when someone asks a police officer, why did you initially pull him over, while this incident is still ongoing, that they're not going to sit down and be like, well, according to code, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. Maybe that particular police officer didn't know. Maybe he wasn't the ones initially pulling over. Maybe his adrenaline was still high. Maybe he was worried about the safety of what the situation was going on elsewhere. I don't know. But what I do know is he's making these, we get through that whole section of the end of the debate, and he keeps saying this was unlawful, this was unlawful. Now, I didn't follow this case super strong, so I didn't know what sort of video has been released since. I knew that he was accused of reckless driving, but I assumed the way Vegan Gaines was talking was like, oh, we clearly see, video evidence of him driving down the street doing nothing wrong and the cops flashing their lights and pulling him over. And then when I found out, he's like, well, we don't really have any video of that, but we just know that it was an illegal stop. How the fuck do you know? Right? It's incredible. It was incredible to, to hear him, I was like, that's it? Just like his proof of possible racism was, that black guy said the N-word. It's like, holy shit. So, I don't know. But no hard feelings towards Vegan Gaines. I hope he does well. He says I'm lying after the debate. I'm not. Wait, he's saying I'm lying because I said maybe he was winded. I guess what he's saying is this, that there was video footage that I haven't seen. This is what he seemed to be saying, that I see the footage where he's standing there, right? And the initial, and then he runs off. And then I see the footage afterwards where they're punching him. But apparently he's saying part of that first footage or footage that occurred elsewhere at some point, there was a police officer not in direct engagement with Tyre Nichols, not running, just calmly standing there, no longer at the situation where this is occurring. And someone apparently, I'll steel man him, someone said, why did you initially pull him over? And he says he ran from the cops. And they're like, but what was the initial charge? And he said, he ran from the cops. He still could have adrenaline. He still could have been winded from the I don't know. The idea that he's saying because I use the term winded, what I'm talking about is adrenaline. When your intensity goes up because you're involved in something like that maybe you're not the most clear-headed and sitting there and answering a question in a calm demeanor that's particularly showing the outcomes of the case. He has no proof that, his supposition that because that person couldn't say initially there, oh, it was for reckless driving, that proves that the whole thing was bullshit. It was all bullshit. Think about this. Presumably, let's say that this occurred, right? Let's say presumably that when they pulled him over, they called it in. I don't know if that's always procedure, but they said, yeah, we're going to pull over this, Buick for reckless driving or code, whatever it would be, if they said that, right, could it not still be possible that was bullshit? Yeah, of course it could be. But then later, wouldn't a person that was covering up for this say, oh, reckless driving? Wouldn't they say that? So why didn't he just continue the lie that they already told? Or is the allegation they didn't come up with the lie initially? They just said, we're just going to pull his car over and we're not going to say why. I assume that the lie would have been made at the time that they pulled over, or pulling you over for reckless driving. Nonetheless, he could say that I was lying. What you need to do if you're Vegan Gaines in a debate like this, where you got crushed so badly on every topic, is try to find one area where you could salvage it, where you could have some sort of righteous indignation, right? And that's what he's attempting to do. So he's like, there's this one point. That guy wasn't winded. His adrenaline wasn't high. And that proves the whole case was bullshit. It doesn't prove that. And he's making these definitive statements like he's saying, I know that 100% of camera footage has been released. Not just obtained, but released. What a bold statement. What a bold fucking statement. That means that Vegan Danes is certain that there was no one standing on the side of the street like this recording when they saw the police officers with the red lights trying to pull him over the first time. No one was recording it. Or if they were, the police have that footage. There was no person. Do I think Fetterman had a serious stroke tonight? I don't know. That was last evening that he was taken to the hospital. Who knows? I think that the writing was on the wall that he's not going to make 6 years of a Senate term. He doesn't have the cognitive abilities to do so. So this could be a convenient excuse to get him out there, or he could still be in dire straits with medical situations. I hope that he's fine medically, but it's terrible that he's a senator. So, there you go. If you see any footage that comes out in the trial or after that, any new footage, regardless of what it shows, it might show that these cops are even worse than the light we're seeing. Remember, Vegan Gaines was definitive that his advice to run from the police was in part based on the fact that he was absolutely certain that he saw every piece of available footage. What a bullshit, bold statement. And he made a lot of statements throughout that debate that was just like these declarative statements like, oh, ever since, policing in this place changed and crime's gone down. Like, since when? Because what I'm looking at, no. So, I mean, I don't know. But, yeah, I mean, you judge for yourself. I think even if you're on a lefty side of the equation and you disagree with my opinions on this, I don't think Vegan Gaines was a good advocate for your side. He didn't really say much. He just, I don't know, I wasn't that impressed. I think he tried to up the intensity a little there at the end and try to salvage something, but, I don't know. If that's an issue, the way that debate was set up was Vegan Gaines reached out and said he wanted to debate someone on the Tyre Nichols situation and potential systemic racism. I just think you would have more than, that guy said the N-word, I think. That black guy said the N-word, I think he might be racist. So I hope I lived up to expectations. People said they wanted me to crush him tonight. I hope I lived up to that. But honestly, no hard feelings to Vegan Gaines. It's okay. He can call me a liar. I don't have hard feelings about it. I don't mind at all. I wish he would change his rhetoric. It's very dangerous to advise to people that if they feel threatened, they should run from police. That's very bad advice. So, my advice is going to be to comply as best as possible, unless they're raping you, I guess. That would be my advice. And have your day in court. Live to see another day, and then get the best attempt at justice that you deserve. I wish that Tyre Nichols would have lived, and I wish that he would have received justice while being alive, both in the form of financial compensation and also in the form of criminal charges being filed against the officers who did this to him. I wish he would have lived, and I think he would have had a better chance to live if he wouldn't have ran. That's what I think. And I also have to be honest, I'm poorly positioned to know the exact particulars of what went on that first stop. He kept saying that it was evident that they were murderers then. I don't recall big haymakers and shit. I recall them leaning on him and saying, put your arms behind your back, and kind of giving him little shots on the ground, but nothing like the insanity that was later. And you see those interactions a lot, many times unjustified when people are on the ground and police are doing that. But sometimes you can see that it's more difficult than you think to try to position someone on the ground in a way that you can incapacitate them to be able to take them in. Doesn't excuse the behavior of these cops or the cops, thank you, Anonymous, that do it unjustly in the situations where they do. But I'm just saying it's difficult for a layman like me to understand just how tough it could be, even someone that's smaller than you, to get in those positions. But that's a far cry from haymakers while someone's hands behind their back, handcuffed behind their back, to say he knew at that point if he could run that he should because he was going to die. I think it's terrible advice. I really do. And I hope more people, regardless of your skin color, don't listen to that advice. I think it's a mistake. So, all right. Anyways, tomorrow night, 8:30, exclusively on my Rumble channel, which I can't type in the chat. So if someone would be so generous to type my Rumble channel in the chat, that's rumble.com/user/normal America. I will be hosting Drunken Debates. I will not be debating. I will be hosting. It will be on the right, John Burke, lecture fan, and And who is the other righty? John Burke lecture. Oh, for God's sakes. Let me check. If Aftershock's here, he'll tell you. Shit, I'm so bad at this. There's a good one. Counterpoints. John Burke lecture fan and counterpoints. And on the left will be Layman, Prime K's, and Stardust. So, that's... I'll pick the topics. If you get on my Discord, if you have any ideas for topics, I can't guarantee that I'll do them, but go ahead and give it a shot. It's going to be weird. You always try to find for me, because we don't disclose the topics, I'm trying to find topics that'll fit with this group. And it's kind of a weird group, to be honest. You know, you have a lawyer and lecture fan that might want to get in a sort of a meat and potatoes topic, like with some sort of policy or legal case. And I think with Stardust, you have more of like a, you know, sort of joking around culture type person. So, but nonetheless, all right. Thank you all so much. I will see you. It's asking you to make an account. Yeah, Rumble's fine to make an account on. And anyone chime up in the chat. Has anyone had any spam from Rumble? Any, you know, I haven't had any. I think that the one thing I could say is the interface is better on YouTube than Rumble. I will agree with that. But Rumble to me hasn't been a shady website like sending me spam or, you know, anything like that. Link to Discord? Yeah. Can someone put a link to my Discord? I am so sorry. Like literally, if you could see my screen right now, the chat is just, it's a mess. It's like froze. So if someone could put the link to my Discord, chat and Rumble sometimes lags. Yeah, I know. But I got to try to move people to Rumble because I'm eventually going to be banned on Twitch and YouTube and places like that. So that's sort of the plan. So, all right, thank you so much. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I got some stuff coming on in the background here. I hope that the audio, if you probably can't tell, but I put those sound dampening foam squares up on my walls here. I made some adjustments to my camera. Hopefully it looks good. So I'm trying to get better at those technical things. And hopefully we continue to grow as a channel. So thank you so much, each and every one of you. I really appreciate you all. Look forward to seeing you on Rumble at 8:30 tomorrow night. As always, have a good one. Oh, thank you so much, Poop Midas. Appreciate it. Please send me your money so I can buy a new computer. I would really appreciate it. That's the plan. So my wife doesn't freak out because I'm pissing all of my money away. Things. My friend Aftershock and producer, you know, he hooked me up with, I'm going to try to build my own. So it should be around $1,500. And hopefully that machine will get me to where I need to be. So all financial donations, very much appreciated. All right. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed tonight's stream. We will see you all tomorrow. As always, have a good one. Oh, great. Maybe. Here we go. It's lagging for me.